Many fuel tanks incorporate underscore valves to prevent fuel from flowing away from the boost pump or tank outlet when the aircraft is in a high G maneuver. Flapper. When inspecting a fuel system, you should check all valves located downstream of boost pumps with the pumps operating. Major adjustments on equipment such as regulators, contactors, and inverters are best accomplished outside the airplane on test benches with necessary instruments and equipment. Adjustment procedures should be as outlined by the equipment manufacturer. Welding over brazed or soldered joints is not permitted. Alloy 2117 rivets are heat-treated by the manufacturer and do not require heat treatment before being driven. One of the main advantages of high-lock type fasteners over earlier generations is that they can be installed with ordinary hand tools. On a sheet metal fitting layout with a single bend, allow for stretching by, subtracting the setback from both legs. When repairing a small hole on a metal-stressed skin, the major consideration in the design of the patch should be the shear strength of the riveted joint. How should a welding torch flame be adjusted to weld stainless steel? Slightly carburizing. Parts fabricated from Alclad 2024 T3 aluminum sheet stock must have all scratches, kinks, tool marks, nicks, etc. must be held to a minimum. When straightening members made of 2024 T4, you should straighten cold and reinforce. If too much acetylene is used in the welding of stainless steel, the metal will absorb carbon and lose its resistance to corrosion. The sharpest bend that can be placed in a piece of metal without critically weakening the part is called the minimum radius of bend. Oxygen and acetylene cylinders are made of steel. Determine the dimensions of A, B, and C in the flat layout. Setback equal sign 0.252, bend allowance equal sign 0.345, A equal sign 0.748, B equal sign 1.496, C equal sign 1.248. What is dimension F? Setback at D equal sign 0.095. Setback at E equal sign 0.068. Bend allowance at D equal sign 0.150. Bend allowance at E equal sign 0.112, 5.936. Filing or grinding a weld bead is considered to be a way to bring about strength reduction in joint. When an MS 20470D rivet is installed, its full shear strength is obtained, only after a period of age hardening. Under certain conditions, Type A rivets are not used because of their low strength characteristics. How many MS 20470 AD46 rivets will be required to attach a 10x 5-inch plate using a single row of rivets, minimum edge distance, and 4D spacing? 56. Which part of 2017 T36 aluminum alloy indicates the temper designation T36? Heat-treated rivets in the D and DD series that are not driven within the prescribed time after heat treatment or removal from refrigeration must be reheat treated before use. You can distinguish between aluminum and aluminum alloy by testing with a 10% solution of caustic soda, which is correct concerning the use of a file. Apply pressure on the forward stroke only, except when filing very soft metals such as lead or aluminum. When welding or cutting, the acetylene pressure gauge should never be set higher than 15 psi. Which statement concerning soldering is correct? Joints and electric wire to be soldered should be mechanically secure prior to soldering. The identifying marks on the heads of aluminum alloy rivets indicate the specific alloy used in the manufacture of the rivets. A sheet metal repair is to be made using two pieces of 0.040-inch aluminum riveted together. All rivet holes are drilled for three 32-inch rivets. The length of the rivets to be used will be 1 4-inch. Repairs or splices involving stringers on the lower surface of stressed skin metal wings are usually permitted, but are normally more critical in reference to strength and tension than similar repairs to the upper surface. Where should the flux be applied when oxyacetylene welding aluminum? Painted on the surface to be welded and applied to the welding rod. What is the flat layout dimension? 6.8 inches. When bending metal, the material on the outside of the curve stretches, while the material on the inside of the curve compresses. That part of the material which is not affected by either stress is the neutral line. Acetylene at a line pressure above 15 psi is dangerously unstable. The installation of Cherry Max and Olympic lock rivets is accomplished by utilizing a pulling tool. What purpose does flux serve in welding aluminum? Minimizes or prevents oxidation. What is indicated by a black smoky residue streaming back from some of the rivets on an aircraft? Fretting corrosion is occurring between the rivets and the skin. Which of the following is one advantage of high-lock fasteners? Inability to be over-torqued. The general rule for finding the proper rivet diameter is 3 times the thickness of the thickest sheet. If a streamlined cover plate is to be hand-formed using a form block, a piece of dead soft aluminum should first be placed over the hollow portion of the mold and securely fastened in place. The bumping operation should be started by tapping the aluminum lightly around the edges and gradually working down into the center. When repairing puncture-type damage to a metal-faced laminated honeycomb panel, the edges of the doubler should be tapered to 100 times the thickness of the metal. In gas tungsten arc, GETA welding, a stream of inert gas is used to prevent the formation of oxides in the puddle. The purpose of a joggle is to allow clearance for a sheet or an extrusion. Select the alternative, which best describes the function of the flute section of a twist drill. Forms the cutting edges of the drill point. A DD rivet is heat-treated before use to soften to facilitate riveting. What is the minimum edge distance for aircraft rivets? 2 times the diameter of the rivet shank. In selecting a torch tip size to use in welding, the size of the tip opening determines the amount of heat applied to the work. Engine mount members should preferably be repaired by using a larger diameter tube with fish mouth and rosette welds. The shop head of a rivet should be 1 1/2 times the diameter of the rivet shank. Rivet gauge, or transverse pitch, is the distance between the centers of rivets in adjacent rows. Mild steel rivets are used for riveting steel parts. When soldering close-fitting parts, solder is drawn into the space between the two parts by capillary action. When a piece of aluminum alloy is to be bent using a minimum radius for the type and thickness of material, the layout should be made so that the bend will be 90 degrees to the grain of the sheet. Why should a carburizing flame be avoided when welding steel? It hardens the surface. Which rivet may be used as received without further treatment? 2117 T3. Which of the rivets shown will accurately fit the conical depression made by a 100 degrees? Countersink? 1. A very thin and pointed tip on a soldering copper is undesirable because it will cool too rapidly. The primary alloying agent of 2024 T3 is indicated by the number 2, the flat layout or blank length of a piece of metal from which a simple L-shaped bracket 3 inches by 1 inch is to be bent depends upon the radius of the desired bend. The bracket which will require the greatest amount of material is one which has a bend radius of 1/8 inch. The length of flat A is 3.750 inches. The amount of material required to make the 90 degrees bend is 0.3436 inch. The sight line on a sheet metal flat layout to be bent in a cornice or box break is measured and marked 1 radius from the bend tangent line that is placed under the break. And the most important factors needed to make a flat pattern layout are radius, thickness, and degree of bend. What should be the included angle of a twist drill for soft metals? 90 degrees. Most rivets used in aircraft construction have dimples. A welding torch backfire may be caused by a loose tip. What is one of the determining factors which permits machine countersinking when flush riveting? Thickness of the material is greater than the thickness of the rivet head. Which part of the 2017 T36 aluminum alloy designation indicates the primary alloying agent used in its manufacture? 2. What is generally the best procedure to use when removing a solid shank rivet? Drill to the base of the manufactured rivet head with a drill one size smaller than the rivet shank and remove the rivet with a punch. When riveting dissimilar metals together, what precautions must be taken to prevent an electrolytic action? Place a protective separator between areas of potential electrical difference. Oxides form very rapidly when alloys or metals are hot. It is important, therefore, when welding aluminum to use a flux. Which rivet is used for riveting nickel-steel alloys? Monel and gas welding, the amount of heat applied to the material being welded is controlled by the size of the tip opening. Why are aluminum plates 1/4 inch or more thick usually preheated before welding? Reduces internal stresses and assures more complete penetration. Edge notching is generally recommended in butt welding above a certain thickness of aluminum because it aids in getting full penetration of the metal and prevents local distortion. Shallow scratches in sheet metal may be repaired by burnishing. Which of the following statements is true regarding replacement rivets? The new edge distance of larger replacement rivet must not be less than minimums annealing of aluminum, removes stresses caused by forming. The dimensions of an MS 20430 AD48 rivet are 1/8 inch in diameter and 1/2 inch long. A main difference between lock bolt, huck bolt tension, and shear fasteners, other than their application, is in the number of locking collar grooves. Unless otherwise specified, the radius of a bend is the inside radius of the metal being formed. What should be the included angle of a twist drill for hard metal? 118 degrees. Clad aluminum alloys are used in aircraft because they have surface layers of pure aluminum or aluminum alloy bonded to the core material to inhibit corrosion. The length of rivet to be chosen when making a structural repair that involves the joining of 0.032 inch and 0.064 inch aluminum sheet drilled with a No 30 drill is 5/16 inch. What is the purpose of refrigerating 2017 and 2024 aluminum alloy rivets after heat treatment? To retard age hardening. The length of a rivet to be used to join a sheet of 0.032 inch and 0.064 inch aluminum alloy should be equal to 1½ times the rivet diameter plus 0.096 inch. The shielding gases generally used in the gas tungsten arc, GTA welding of aluminum, consist of helium or argon, or a mixture of helium and argon. What method of repair is recommended for a steel tube longeron dented at a cluster? Welded patch plate. When comparing the machining techniques for stainless steel sheet material to those for aluminum alloy sheet, it is normally considered good practice to drill the stainless steel at a lower speed with more pressure applied to the drill. Which rivets should be selected to join two sheets of 0.032 inch aluminum? MS 20470 AD44. What is the minimum spacing for a single row of aircraft rivets? 3 times the diameter of the rivet shank. A well-designed rivet joint will subject the rivets to shear loads. A factor which determines the minimum space between rivets is the out diameter of the rivets being used. Which procedure is correct when using a reamer to finish a drilled hole to the correct size? And turn the reamer only in the cutting direction. The oxyacetylene flame used for aluminum welding should be neutral and soft and at 45 degrees. Angle. Which rivet is used for riveting magnesium alloy structures? 5056 aluminum A rivet set used to drive MS 20470 or AN 470 rivets should have a slightly greater radius than the rivet head. Joggles in removed rivet shanks would indicate partial shear failure. Which statement is true in regard to welding heat-treated magnesium? The welded section does not have the strength of the original metal. Select the preferred drawing for proper countersinking. 1. What is dimension D? Setback, equal sign, 0.252. Bend allowance, equal sign, 0.345, 4.182. Why is it necessary to use flux in all silver soldering operations? To chemically clean the base metal of oxide film. The DZU's turnlock fastener consists of a stud, grommet, and receptacle. The stud length is measured in hundredths of an inch. When a butt-welded joint is visually inspected for penetration, the penetration should be 100% of the thickness of the base metal. A single lap sheet splice is to be used to repair a section of damaged aluminum skin. If a double row of 1/8-inch rivets is used, the minimum allowable overlap will be 13 16-inch MS 20426. AD65 indicates a countersunk rivet which has an overall length of 5 16-inch rivet pitch is the distance between the centers of adjacent rivets in the same row. The oxyacetylene flame for silver soldering should be neutral, which is the grip length of the flush rivet. 3. What is the minimum edge distance allowed for aluminum alloy single lap sheet splices containing a single row of rivets as compared to a joint with multiple rows, all rivets being equal in diameter? The minimum edge distance for the single row is equal to that for the multiple row. Which of the following can normally be welded without adversely affecting strength? SAE. 4130 chrome molybdenum tubing. When selecting a welding rod, one of the most important factors to consider is to ensure that the proper AMS number is used. Cylinders used to transport and store acetylene contain acetone. The DZU's turnlock fastener consists of a stud, grommet, and receptacle. The stud diameter is measured in 1/16 of an inch. What precaution, if any, should be taken to prevent corrosion inside a repaired metal honeycomb structure. Prime the repair with a corrosion inhibitor and seal from the atmosphere. A sheet metal repair is to be made using two pieces of 0.0625-inch aluminum riveted together. All rivet holes are drilled for 1 8-inch rivets. The length of the rivets to be used will be 5 16-inch. A piece of flat stock that is to be bent to a closed angle of 15 degrees must be bent through an angle of 165 degrees. A resurfaced soldering iron cannot be used effectively until after the working face has been tinned. The aluminum alloys used in aircraft construction are usually hardened by which method? Heat treatment to aircraft structural units such as spars, engine supports, etc., which have been built up from sheet metal are normally repairable using approved methods. What is the length of flat A? 3.7 inches. High-pressure cylinders used to transport and store acetylene must contain acetone. Which statement is true regarding the inspection of a stressed skin metal wing assembly known to have been critically loaded? If genuine rivet tipping has occurred, groups of consecutive rivet heads will be tipped in the same direction. Which statement best describes magnesium welding? Filler rod should be the same composition as base metal. Which statement concerning a welding process is true? The inert arc welding process uses an inert gas to protect the weld zone from the atmosphere. When drilling stainless steel, the drill used should have an included angle of 140 degrees and turn at a low speed. Threaded rivets, rivnuts, are commonly used to attach parts or components with screws to sheet metal. What type loads cause the most rivet failures? Shear. The markings on the head of a DZU's fastener identify the body diameter, type of head, and length of the fastener. The most important consideration, as when selecting welding rod, is material compatibility. If it is necessary to compute a bend allowance problem and bend allowance tables are not available, the neutral axis of the bend can be found by adding approximately 1/2 of the stock thickness to the bend radius. Which of the following need not be considered when determining minimum rivet spacing? Rivet length. Which statement best describes magnesium welding? It can be welded successfully using the same type of joints that are used for aluminum. What is the purpose of a gusset or gusset plate used in the construction and repair of aircraft structures? To join and reinforce intersecting structural members. Which parts of a semi-monocoque fuselage prevent tension and compression from bending the fuselage? Longerons and stringers. The classification for fiberglass reinforcement material that has high resistivity and is the most common is E-glass. When making repairs to fiberglass, cleaning of the area to be repaired is essential for a good bond. The final cleaning should be made using MEK, methyl ethyl ketone. Servicing diagrams that show the arrangement of equipment and location of quick access doors on an aircraft can be found in the aircraft manufacturer's maintenance manual. Which of the following are benefits of using microballoons when making repairs to laminated honeycomb panels? Improved strength-to-weight ratio, less density, and lower stress concentrations. What is the most common method of cementing transparent plastics? Soak method. Fiberglass damage that extends completely through a laminated sandwich structure may be repaired. Which of the following drill bit types work best when drilling an aramid fiber, Kevlar, composite laminate? Carbide W point. One of the best ways to assure that a properly prepared batch of matrix resin has been achieved is to have mixed enough for a test sample. Which of the following are generally characteristic of carbon graphite fiber composites? Stiffness, high compressive strength, and corrosive effect in contact with aluminum. Glue deterioration in wood aircraft structure is indicated when a joint has separated and the glue surface shows only the imprint of the wood with no wood fibers clinging to the glue. If masking tape is applied to an aircraft, such as for trim spraying, and is left on for several days and/or exposed to heat, it is likely that the tape will cure to the finish and be very difficult to remove. On a semi-monocoque fuselage, the skin is reinforced by longitudinal structural members called longerons and stringers. What is the usual cause of runs and sags in aircraft finishes? Too much material applied in one coat. Which defect in aircraft finishes may be caused by adverse humidity, drafts, or sudden changes in temperature? Blushing. The strength and stiffness of a properly constructed composite buildup depends primarily on the orientation of the plies to the load direction. Which fiber to resin percent ratio for advanced composite wet layups is generally considered the best for strength? 60-40. Proper pre-preg composite layup curing is generally accomplished by applying external heat and pressure, repairing advanced composites using materials and techniques traditionally used for fiberglass repairs is likely to result in unairworthy repair. Laminated wood spars may be substituted for solid rectangular wood spars if the same quality wood is used in both. Which of the following conditions will determine acceptance of wood with mineral streaks? Careful inspection fails to reveal any decay. When testing the strength of grade A cotton fabric covering an aircraft that requires only intermediate grade, the minimum acceptable strength the fabric must have is 70% of the original strength for intermediate fabric. Hole-filling fasteners, for example, MS 20,470 rivets, should not be used in composite structures primarily because of the possibility of causing delamination. Where is information found concerning acceptable species substitutions for wood materials used in aircraft repair? AC 43. 13.1b. The coefficient of expansion of most plastic enclosure materials is greater than both steel and aluminum. Which of the following are generally characteristic of aramid fiber, Kevlar, composites? High tensile strength and flexibility. A correct use for acetone is to remove grease from fabric. When necessary, what type of cutting fluid is usually acceptable for machining composite laminates? Water only. Moisture, mildew, chemicals, and acids have no effect on glass fabric. What is the material layer used within the vacuum bag pressure system to absorb excess resin during curing called? Bleeder. Which statement is true regarding paint system compatibility? Old wash primer coats may be overcoated directly with epoxy finishes. Before applying a protective coating to any unpainted clean aluminum, you should avoid touching the surface with bare hands. When conducting a tap test on a composite panel, which of the following sounds would indicate delamination? Dull thud. Metal fasteners used with carbon graphite composite structures must be constructed of material such as titanium or corrosion-resistant steel. If a new safety belt is to be installed in an aircraft, the belt must conform to the strength requirements in which document? TSOC 22. A faint line running across the grain of a wood spar generally indicates compression failure. How does acoustic emission testing detect defects in composite materials? By picking up the noise of any deterioration that may be present. A piece of sheet metal is bent to a certain radius. The curvature of the bend is referred to as the bend radius. The best method of repair for a fabric-covered surface, which has an L-shaped tear, each leg of which is approximately 14 inches long, is to sew with a baseball stitch from the center of the tear out toward the extremity of each leg, and then dope on a patch. Which properly applied finish topcoat is the most durable and chemical resistant? Polyurethane. Pin knot clusters are permitted in wood aircraft structure provided. They produce a small effect on grain direction. The determining factor as for the selection of the correct weight of textile fabric to be used in covering any type of aircraft is the speed of the aircraft and the maximum wing loading. In cases of elongated bolt holes in a wood spar or cracks in the vicinity of bolt holes, a new section of spar should be spliced in or the spar replaced entirely. When and how is finishing tape applied on a fabric-covered aircraft? Doped on after the first or second coat of dope. Which statement about wood decay is correct? Decay is not acceptable in any form or amount. Which is an identifying characteristic of acrylic plastics? Zinc chloride will have no effect. Fiberglass laminate damage that extends completely through one facing and into the core. It requires the replacement of the damaged core and facing. Superficial scars, scratches, surface abrasion, or rain erosion on fiberglass laminates can generally be repaired by applying one or more coats of suitable resin, room temperature catalyzed, to the surface. The part of a replacement honeycomb core that must line up with the adjacent original is the ribbon direction. Which of these methods may be used to inspect fiberglass honeycomb structures for entrapped water? X-ray and backlighting. When humidity is low, what is likely to occur if unhydrated wash primer is applied to unpainted aluminum, and then, about 30 to 40 minutes later, a finished top coat is applied? Corrosion. Which of the following is a hazard associated with sanding on fabric-covered surfaces during the finishing process? Static electricity buildup. When inspecting a composite panel using the ring test tapping method, a dull thud may indicate separation of the laminates. One method of inspecting a laminated fiberglass structure that has been subjected to damage is to strip the damaged area of all paint and shine a strong light through the structure. Cabin upholstery materials installed in current standard category airplanes must be at least flame resistant. What reference tool is used to determine how the fiber is to be oriented for a particular ply of fabric? Warp clock or compass. The monocoque fuselage relies largely on the strength of skin or covering. A potted compound repair on honeycomb can usually be made on damages less than 1 inch in diameter. Which statement is true regarding a cantilever wing? No external bracing is needed. When dope-proofing the parts of the aircraft structure that come in contact with doped fabric, which of the following provide an acceptable protective coating? Aluminum foil and cellulose tape. If an aircraft's transparent plastic enclosures exhibit fine cracks which may extend in a network over or under the surface or through the plastic is said to be crazing. The length of time that a catalyzed resin will remain in a workable state is called the pot life. The cantilever wing uses no external bracing. Fiberglass laminate damage not exceeding the first layer or ply can be repaired by filling with a putty consisting of a compatible resin and clean, short glass fibers. When installing transparent plastic enclosures, which are retained by bolts extending through the plastic material and self-locking nuts, the nuts should be tightened to a firm fit, then backed off 1 full turn. The classification for high tensile strength fiberglass used in aircraft structures is S-glass. What type of bit should be used to drill holes in plexiglass? A specially modified twist drill. The preferred way to make permanent repairs on composites is by laminating on new repair plies. Which of the following, when added to wet resins, provides strength for the repair of damaged fastener holes in composite panels, flocks, and chopped fibers? For doped and overlapping span-wise seams on a wing's leading edge, overlap the fabric at least 4 inches, and cover with finishing tape at least 4 inches wide, with the tape centered on the leading edge of the wing. Aluminum pigment in dope is used primarily to reflect ultraviolet from the fabric. When balsa wood is used to replace a damaged honeycomb core, the plug should be cut so that the grain is perpendicular to the skin. Laminated wood is sometimes used in the construction of highly stressed aircraft components. This wood can be identified by its parallel grain construction. Finishing tape, surface tape, is used for what purpose? To provide additional wear resistance over the edges of fabric forming structures. Which type of coating typically includes phosphoric acid as one of its components at the time of application? Wash primer. Fabric rejuvenator is used to restore the condition of dope coatings. Which type of monocoque structure has the skin reinforced by a complete framework of structural members? Reinforced shell. How many fabric thicknesses will be found in a French fell seam? 4. What is used to slow the drying time of some finishes and to prevent blush? Retarder. The I-beam wooden spar is routed to reduce weight. When humidity is low, what is likely to occur if hydrated wash primer is applied to unpainted aluminum, and then, 30 to 40 minutes later, a finished top coat is applied? A glossy, blush-free finish. Which statement concerning wood decay is correct? Any form or amount of decay is not permitted. Any wooden member that has been overstressed is subject to which type of failure? Compression. Composite fabric material is considered to be the strongest in what direction? Warp. When patching a plywood skin, abrupt changes in cross-sectional areas which will develop dangerous stress concentration should be avoided by using circular or elliptical patches, which is considered good practice concerning the installation of acrylic plastics. When rivets are used, adequate spacer or other satisfactory means to prevent excessive tightening of the frame to the plastic should be provided. A category of plastic material that is capable of softening or flowing when reheated is described as a thermoplastic. If no scratches are visible after transparent plastic enclosure materials have been cleaned, their surfaces should be covered with a thin coat of wax sandwich panels made of honeycomb construction are used on aircraft because this type of construction saves weight while not compromising strength. When repairing large, flat surfaces with polyester resins, warping of the surface is likely to occur. One method of reducing the amount of warp page is to use short strips of fiberglass in the bonded repair. Machine-sewn seams in aircraft covering fabrics may be of which of the following types? L. Folded fell, French fell, or plain lapped. Compression failures in wood aircraft structures are characterized by buckling of the fibers that appear as streaks on the surface, at right angles to the grain. Fungicidal dopes are used in aircraft finishing as the first coat to prevent fabric rotting and are applied thin enough to saturate the fabric. Fungicide and mildewicide additives are important for fabric-covered aircraft, such as cotton and linen. The strength of a well-designed and properly prepared wood splice joint is provided by the A. Glue. The strength classification of fabrics used in aircraft covering is based on tensile strength. When the lift of an airfoil increases, the drag will also increase. Improper rigging of the elevator trim tab system will affect the balance of the airplane about its lateral axis. If the travel of an airplane's controls is correct, but the cables are rigged exceptionally tight, what probable effect will this have when flying the airplane? The airplane will be heavy on the controls. As the angle of attack of an airfoil increases, the center of pressure will move toward the leading edge. Where would you find precise information to perform a symmetry alignment check for a particular aircraft? Aircraft service or maintenance manual? How are changes in direction of a control cable accomplished? Pulleys. If a pilot reports that an airplane flies left wing heavy, this condition may be corrected by increasing the angle of incidence of the left wing or decreasing the angle of incidence of the right wing, or both. If all instructions issued by the swagging tool manufacturer are followed when swagging a cable terminal, the resultant swagged terminal strength should be the full rated strength of the cable. Differential control on an aileron system means that the up travel is more than the down travel. Proper wing twist in a sheet metal constructed wing can usually be checked by utilizing a bubble level and special fixtures described by the manufacturer. Movement of an airplane along its lateral axis, roll, is also movement, around or about the longitudinal axis controlled by the ailerons. The angle of incidence of an airplane at rest does not change when in flight. A tension regulator in the flight control cable system of a large all-metal aircraft is used primarily to retain a set tension. Excessive wear on both of the sides of a control cable pulley groove is evidence of pulley misalignment. The correct dihedral angle can be determined by using a dihedral board and bubble level along the front spar of each wing. The chord of a wing is measured from leading edge to trailing edge. When inspecting a control cable turnbuckle for proper installation, determine that the safety wire ends are wrapped a minimum of 4 turns around the terminal end shanks. Fair leads should never deflect the alignment of a cable more than 3 degrees. Buffeting is the intermittent application of forces to a part of an airplane. It is caused by an unsteady flow from turbulence. If the control stick of an aircraft with properly rigged flight controls is moved rearward and to the left, the right aileron will move down and the elevator will move up. The cable-operated control system of an all-metal aircraft, not incorporating a temperature-compensating device, has been rigged to the correct tension in a heated hangar. If the aircraft is operated in very cold weather, the cable tension will decrease when the aircraft structure and cables become cold. The dihedral angle of a wing may be measured by placing a straightedge and level protractor on the front spar. An airplane that has a tendency to gradually increase a pitching moment that has been set into motion has poor longitudinal stability. What is the smallest size cable that may be used in aircraft primary control systems? 1/8 inch. During inspection of the flight control system of an airplane equipped with differential type aileron control, side-to-side movement of the control stick will cause each aileron to have a greater up travel from the streamline position than down travel. The elevators of a conventional airplane are used to provide rotation about the lateral axis. Where is the buttock line or butt line of an aircraft? A width measurement left or right of and parallel to the vertical center line. After repairing or recovering a rudder, the surface should be rebalanced to manufacturer's specifications. Washing in the left wing of a monoplane, for purposes of rigging corrections after flight test, will have what effect on the lift and drag of that wing? Both drag and lift will increase due to increased angle of attack. What non-destructive checking method is normally used to ensure that the correct amount of swagging has taken place when installing swagged-type terminals on aircraft control cable? Use a terminal gauge to check the diameter of the swagged portion of the terminal. The purpose of wing slats is to reduce stalling speed. The universal propeller protractor can be used to measure degrees of flap travel. The acute angle formed by the chord line of a wing and the relative wind is known as the angle of attack. A universal propeller protractor used to measure the degrees of aileron travel should be zeroed, with the aileron in the neutral position. When the outside air temperature is 80 degrees Fahrenheit, select the acceptable 3/16 cable tension range. 117 pounds minimum, 143 pounds maximum. The vast majority of aircraft control cables are terminated with swagged terminals that must be checked with a go-no-go gauge before and after to show compliance with the manufacturer's requirements after the swagging operation. The primary purpose of stall strips is to stall the inboard portion of the wings first. What physical factors are involved in the aspect ratio of airplane wings? Span and chord. If the control stick of an aircraft with properly rigged flight controls is moved forward and to the right, the left aileron will move down and the elevator will move down. If control cables are adjusted properly and the control surfaces tend to vibrate, the probable cause is worn attachment fittings. Where is fuselage station, num 137 located? 137 inches aft of the zero or fixed reference line. The purpose of the vertical fin is to provide directional stability. Identify the cable that is used in primary control systems and in other places where operation over pulleys is frequent. 3. With which system is differential control associated? Aileron movement of the flight deck. Control toward the nose-down position during a ground operational check of the elevator trim tab system will cause the trailing edge of the trim tab to move in which direction? Upward, regardless of elevator position. Stability about the axis, which runs parallel to the line of flight, is referred to as lateral stability. Which statement concerning the 100-hour inspection of an airplane equipped with a push-pull tube type control system is true? The threaded rod ends should be checked for the amount of thread engagement by means of the inspection hole provided. An airplane is controlled directionally about its vertical axis by the rudder. The angle of incidence is that acute angle formed by a line parallel to the wing chord and a line parallel to the longitudinal axis of the aircraft. Rigging and alignment checks should not be undertaken in the open. However, if this cannot be avoided, the aircraft should be positioned with the nose into the wind. Very often, repairs to a control surface require static rebalancing of the control surface. Generally, flight control balance condition may be determined by the behavior of the trailing edge when the surface is suspended from its hinge points. What type of flap system increases the wing area and changes the wing camber? Fowler flaps. An airplane which has good longitudinal stability should have a minimum tendency to pitch. An airplane's center of lift is usually located aft of its center of gravity, so that the airplane will have a nose-heavy tendency. Placing a piece of cloth around a stainless steel control cable and running it back and forth over the length of the cable is generally a satisfactory method of inspecting for broken strands. Where does the breakage of control cable wires occur most frequently? Breakage usually occurs where cables pass over pulleys and through fairleads. The purpose of spring tabs or servo tabs is to assist the pilot in moving the control surfaces. If the right wing of a monoplane is improperly rigged to a greater angle of incidence than designated in the manufacturer's specifications, it will cause our airplane to be off balance both laterally and directionally. Aircraft flight control trim systems must be designed and installed so that the pilot can determine the relative position of the trim tab from the cockpit. Dutch roll, a combination yawing and rolling oscillation that affects many swept-wing aircraft, is counteracted with a yaw damper system. If the vertical fin of a single-engine propeller-driven airplane is rigged properly, it will generally be parallel to the vertical axis, but not the longitudinal axis. Which statement is correct when an aircraft has not been approved for return to service after an annual inspection because of several items requiring minor repair? An appropriately rated mechanic may repair the defects and approve the aircraft for return to service. Airworthiness directives, ADs, are designed to notify the aircraft owners and other interested persons of unsafe conditions and prescribes the condition under which the product may continue to be operated. When overhauling electrical equipment, all necessary information should be obtained from maintenance instructions published by the aircraft and/or equipment manufacturer for an individual, not a repair station, to conduct a complete 100-hour inspection on an aircraft and approve it for return to service requires a mechanic certificate with airframe and power plant ratings. Where would you find the recommended statement for recording the approval or disapproval for return to service of an aircraft? after a 100-hour or annual inspection. 14. CFR Part 43. Radio equipment installations made in accordance with supplemental type certificate data require approval for return to service by the holder of an inspection authorization. An aircraft that is due an annual inspection may be flown, if a special permit has been issued for the aircraft. Where would you find the operating conditions that make a 100-hour inspection mandatory? 14 CFR Part 91. The maximum time a 100-hour inspection may be extended is 10 hours, which statement about airworthiness directives, ADs, is true. Compliance with an applicable AD is mandatory and must be recorded in the maintenance records. Which statement is correct regarding an aircraft that is found to be unairworthy after an annual inspection due to an item requiring a major repair, assuming approved data is used to accomplish the repair? An appropriately rated mechanic may accomplish the repair, and an IA may approve the aircraft for return to service. Large airplanes and turbine-powered multi-engine airplanes operated under 14 CFR Part 91, General Operating and Flight Rules, must be inspected. In accordance with an inspection program authorized under Part 91, Subpart E. An aircraft may be flown beyond the 100-hour inspection requirement to reach a place where the inspection can be accomplished, provided it does not exceed 10 flight hours. Power boost brake systems are used on aircraft that have high landing speeds. Which of the following functions does a skid control system perform? Normal skid control, fail-safe protection, locked wheel skid control, touchdown protection. 1. When an airplane is slowed below approximately 20 miles per hour, the anti-skid system automatically deactivates to give the pilot full control of the brakes for maneuvering and parking. 2. An anti-skid system consists basically of 3 components: wheel speed sensors, control box, and control valves. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. The hydraulic packing seals used in a landing gear shock strut are used only with a specific type of fluid. Brake debooster valve is installed in systems where the high pressure of the hydraulic system, 3,000 psi, is used to operate brakes that are designed to work with lower pressure. What would be the effect if the piston return spring broke in a brake master cylinder? The brakes would drag. Overinflated aircraft tires may cause damage to the wheel flange. If an airplane equipped with master cylinders and single-disc brakes has excessive brake pedal travel, but the brakes are hard and effective, the probable cause is worn brake linings. A stripe or mark applied to a wheel rim and extending onto the sidewall of a tube-type tire is a slippage mark. What is one effect a restricted compensator port of a master cylinder will have on a brake system? The restriction will cause slow release of the brakes. The primary purpose for balancing aircraft wheel assemblies is to prevent heavy spots and reduce vibration. Lockout deboosters are primarily pressure-reducing valves that allow full debooster piston travel without fluid from the high-pressure side entering the low-pressure chamber. An electric motor used to raise and lower a landing gear would most likely be a split-field series wound motor. When will a continuous horn provide a warning in the flight deck? When the throttle is retarded and gear is not down and locked. On an air valve core stem, what indicates high-pressure type? An embossed letter H. What action, if any, should be taken when there is a difference of more than 5 pounds of air pressure in tires mounted as duals? Correct the discrepancy and enter in the aircraft records. At what point in the landing operation does normal skid control perform its function? When wheel rotation deceleration indicates an impending skid. The metering pins in oleo shock struts serve to retard the flow of oil as the struts are compressed. An anti-skid system is an electrohydraulic system. What is the function of a cam incorporated in a nose gear shock strut? Straightens the nose wheel. When installing a chevron-type seal in an aircraft hydraulic cylinder, the open side of the seal should face the direction of fluid pressure. The left brake is dragging excessively on an airplane on which no recent brake service work has been performed. The most probable cause is foreign particles stuck in the master cylinder compensating port. A pilot reports that the brake pedals have excessive travel. A probable cause is lack of fluid in the brake system. The braking action of a Cleveland disc brake is accomplished by compressing a rotating brake disc between 2 opposite brake linings. How is equal pressure on both sides of the rotating disc assured? By allowing the caliper to float to automatically equalize as pressure is applied to the rotor. The trunnion nut on an aircraft landing gear requires a torque of 320 inch-pounds. To reach the nut, a 2-inch straight adapter must be used on an 18-inch torque wrench. How many foot-pounds will be indicated on the torque wrench when the required torque of the nut is reached? 24. What type of valve is used in the brake actuating line to isolate the emergency brake system from the normal power brake control valve system? A shuttle valve. What is the purpose of a compensating port or valve in a brake master cylinder of an independent brake system? Permits the fluid to flow toward or away from the reservoir as temperature changes. When bleeding aircraft brakes, one of the indications that the air has been purged from the system is firm brake pedals. 1. An anti-skid system is designed to apply enough force to operate just below the skid point. 2. A warning lamp lights in the flight deck when the anti-skid system is turned off, or if there is a system failure. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. Internal leakage in a brake master cylinder unit can cause the pedal to slowly creep down while pedal pressure is applied. On most aircraft, the oil level of an air and oil shock strut is checked by releasing the air and seeing that the oil is to the level of the filler plug. Chines are used on some aircraft nose wheel tires to help deflect water away from the fuselage. When an air oil type of landing gear shock strut is used, the initial shock of landing is cushioned by the fluid being forced through a metered opening. Debooster cylinders are used in brake systems primarily to reduce the pressure to the brake and increase the volume of fluid flow. A close inspection of a fusible plug reveals the core has experienced some deformation. What is the appropriate maintenance procedure? Replace all the fusible plugs. A pilot reports the right brake on an aircraft is spongy when the brake pedal is depressed in a normal manner. The probable cause is air in the brake hydraulic system. A high-speed aircraft tire with a sound cord body and bead may be recapped an indefinite number of times. What will illuminate the amber indicator light? Closing the nose, left and right wheel gear, full retract switches. An anti-skid system is designed to sense the deceleration rate of every main landing gear wheel and release then reapply pressure at a slightly lower value when a skid is detected. What landing gear warning device, are incorporated on retractable landing gear aircraft? A horn or other oral device, and a red warning light. In brake service work, the term bleeding brakes is the process of withdrawing fluid from the system for the purpose of removing air that has entered the system. Aircraft brakes requiring a large volume of fluid to operate the brakes generally use power brake control valves. When working with high-pressure, high-performance tires, why is it recommended to deflate the tires when removing wheels from the axle? To ensure safety in case of a defective wheel or broken tie bolts. A special bolt in a landing gear attachment requires a torque value of 440 inch-pounds. How many foot-pounds are required? 36.6. How is it determined in a master cylinder brake system that all of the air has been purged from the system? By depressing the brake and noting that the brake is firm and not spongy. In an anti-skid system, wheel skid is detected by an electrical sensor. The correct inflation pressure for an aircraft tire can be obtained from the aircraft service manual. Excessive wear in the center of the tread of an aircraft tire is an indication of overinflation. Which repair would require a landing gear retraction test? Gear downlock micro switch. A sleeve, spacer, or bumper ring is incorporated in a landing gear oleo shock strut to limit the extension stroke. The pressure source for power brakes is the main hydraulic system. Aside from an external leak in the line, what will cause parking brakes to continually bleed off pressure? An internal leak in the master cylinder. Nose gear centering cams are used in many retractable landing gear systems. The primary purpose of the centering device is to center the nose wheel before it enters the wheel well. What safety device is actuated by the compression and extension of a landing gear strut? Ground safety switch. Debooster valves are used in brake systems primarily to reduce the pressure and release the brakes rapidly. The repair for an out-of-tolerance toe-in condition of main landing gear wheels determined not to be the result of bent or twisted components consists of inserting, removing, or changing the location of washers or spacers at the center pivotal point of the scissor torque links. Extension of an oleo shock strut is measured to determine the proper operating position of the strut. The best safeguards against heat buildup in aircraft tires are short ground rolls, slow taxi speeds, minimum braking, and proper tire inflation. What action should be taken whenever maintenance is performed that will affect the landing gear system performance? The aircraft should be placed on jacks, and a retraction test should be performed. The purpose of a sequence valve in a hydraulic retractable landing gear system is to ensure operation of the landing gear and gear doors in the proper order. Landing gear warning systems usually provide which of the following indications? Red light for unsafe gear, green light for gear down, no light for gear up. The removal, installation, and repair of landing gear tires by the holder of a private pilot certificate on an aircraft owned or operated is considered to be preventive maintenance. An automatic damping action occurs at the steering damper if for any reason the flow of high-pressure fluid is removed from the inlet of the steering damper. In most modern hydraulically actuated landing gear systems, the order of gear and fairing door operation is controlled by sequence valves. Exposure to and/or storage near which of the following is considered harmful to aircraft tires? Fuel, oil, ozone, electrical equipment, hydraulic fluid, and solvents. In a brake anti-skid system, when an approaching skid is sensed, an electrical signal is sent to the skid control valve, which relieves the hydraulic pressure on the brake. Which repair should be made if the gear switch was placed in UP position and the gear does not retract? Replace electrical wire. No. 12. Which of the following conditions is most likely to cause the landing gear warning signal to sound? Landing gear not locked down and throttle retarded. To prevent a very rapid extension of an oleo shock strut after initial compression resulting from landing impact, various types of valves or orifices are used which restrict the reverse fluid flow. If a brake debooster is used in a hydraulic brake system, its position in the system will be between the brake control valve and the brake actuating cylinder. On all aircraft equipped with retractable landing gear, some means must be provided to extend the landing gear if the normal operating mechanism fails. Many brake types can be adapted to operate mechanically or hydraulically. Which type is not adaptable to mechanical operation? Expander tube type. In shock struts, chevron seals are used to prevent oil from escaping. Which statement is true with respect to an aircraft equipped with hydraulically operated multiple disc type brake assemblies? Do not set parking brake when brakes are hot. Why do most aircraft tire manufacturers recommend that the tubes in newly installed tires be first inflated, fully deflated, and then reinflated to the correct pressure? To allow the tube to position itself correctly inside the tire. What is the minimum circumstance that will cause the landing gear warning horn to indicate an unsafe condition? Any gear not down and locked, and one throttle retarded. Where is the landing gear safety switch usually located? On the main gear shock strut. What is the minimum amount of time to wait for tires to cool before checking tire pressure? 3 hours. If an aircraft shock strut, air oil type, bottoms upon initial landing contact, but functions correctly during taxi, the most probable cause is low fluid excessive wear in the shoulder area of an aircraft tire is an indication of underinflation. If the extended longitudinal axis of the main landing gear wheel assemblies intersects aft of the aircraft, the wheels can be termed as having toes out. When servicing an empty shock strut with fluid, the strut should be completely compressed and extended several times to ensure proper packing ring seating and removal of air bubbles. In the air with the anti-skid armed, current cannot flow to the anti-skid control box because the landing gear squat switch is open. If a shock strut bottoms after it has been properly serviced, the strut should be removed, disassembled, and inspected. How long should you wait after a flight before checking tire pressure? At least 2 hours. 3 hours in hot weather. F. It is determined that spongy brake action is not caused by air in the brake system. What is the next most likely cause? Deteriorated flexible hoses. What is the purpose of the torque? Links attached to the cylinder and piston of a landing gear oleo strut. Maintain correct wheel alignment. What is the indication of the red landing gear position light under the following conditions? Aircraft on jacks. Landing gear in transit. Warning horn sounding. Extinguished. Anti-skid braking systems are generally armed by a switch in the cockpit. When servicing an air oil shock strut with ML 5606, the strut should be collapsed and fluid added at the filler opening. An amber light in a gear position indicator system typically indicates what condition. At least one gear is in transition. Aircraft tire pressure should be checked at least once a week or more often. What should be checked when a shock strut bottoms during a landing? Fluid level. Instructions concerning the type of fluid and amount of air pressure to be put in a shock strut are found in the aircraft manufacturer's service manual. The The purpose of a relief valve in a brake system is to compensate for thermal expansion. The fusible plugs installed in some aircraft wheels will melt at a specified elevated temperature. When a landing gear safety switch on a main gear strut closes at liftoff, which system is deactivated? Anti-skid system. If a rigid tube is too short for the flare to reach its seat before tightening, pulling it into place by tightening may distort the flare. The primary function of the flap overload valve is to prevent the flaps from being lowered at air speeds which would impose excessive structural loads. Chattering of the hydraulic pump during operation is an indication that air is entering the pump. One of the distinguishing characteristics of an open center selector valve used in a hydraulic system is that fluid flows through the valve in the off position. Characteristics of MIL H5606 hydraulic fluid are red color, petroleum base, will burn, uses synthetic rubber seals. Most variable displacement aircraft hydraulic pumps in use contain a built-in means of system pressure regulation. Seals used with a mineral base hydraulic fluid are identified by which color code? Blue dot or stripe. Which of the following is the most commonly used seal to prevent internal and external leakage in both directions of a hydraulic unit? O-ring. The unit in a hydraulic system that requires a certain action to be completed before another action can begin is called a sequence valve. Which valve installed in a hydraulic system will have the highest pressure setting? A's. Thermal relief valve. An AN flared tube fitting is referred to in which picture? 1. A loud hammering noise in a hydraulic system that has an accumulator usually indicates too low or no preload in the accumulator. If a hydraulic brake system uses neoprene rubber packing materials, the correct hydraulic fluid to service the system is mineral base oil. Relief valves are used in pneumatic systems as damage-preventing units. If fluid is added to a reservoir in a constant pressure hydraulic system while the system is pressurized, what will result? The fluid level will increase when system pressure is reduced. When hydraulic system pressure control and relief units fail to function properly, how are most systems protected against overpressure? A shear section on the main hydraulic pump drive shaft. What type of valve in an aircraft hydraulic system permits fluid to flow freely in one direction, but restricts the rate at which fluid is allowed to flow in the other direction? Orifice check valve. What is the main purpose of a pressurized reservoir in a hydraulic system? Prevent hydraulic pump cavitation. An emergency supply of fluid is often retained in the main hydraulic system reservoir by the use of a standpipe. The supply line is connected to the inlet of the main hydraulic system. What happens to the output of a constant displacement hydraulic pump when the hydraulic system pressure regulator diverts the fluid from the system to the reservoir? The output pressure reduces, but the volume remains the same. The main system pressure relief valve in a simple hydraulic system equipped with a power control valve should be adjusted, with the power control valve held in the closed position. How is the air in a hydraulic accumulator prevented from entering the fluid system? By physically separating the air chamber from the oil chamber with a flexible or movable separator. Chatter in a hydraulic system is caused by air in the system. What type of selector valve is one of the most commonly used in hydraulic systems to provide for simultaneous flow of fluid into and out of a connected actuating unit? 4-port closed center valve. After installation of a rebuilt hydraulic hand pump, it is found that the handle cannot be moved in the pumping direction, pressure stroke. The most likely cause is an incorrectly installed hand pump outport check valve. Hydraulic system thermal relief valves are set to open at a higher pressure than the system relief valve, which is true regarding the ground check of a flap operating mechanism which has just been installed. If the time required to operate the mechanism decreases with successive operations, it indicates the air is being worked out of the system. Which of the following safeguards ensures proper system operation and mitigates damage to non-metallic components of the hydraulic system? When adding fluid to a system, use the type specified in the aircraft manufacturer's maintenance manual or on the instruction plate affixed to the reservoir or unit being serviced. The removal of air from an aircraft hydraulic system is generally accomplished by operating the various hydraulic components through several cycles. A hydraulic pump is a constant displacement type if it delivers a uniform rate of fluid flow. Excluding lines, which components are required to make up a simple hydraulic system? Pump, reservoir, selector valve, and actuator. A hydraulic system operational check during ground run-up of an aircraft indicates that the wing flaps cannot be lowered using the main hydraulic system, but can be lowered by using the emergency hand pump, which is the most likely cause. The fluid level in the reservoir is low. The purpose of an orifice check valve is to restrict flow in one direction and allow free flow in the other. Hydraulic fluid filtering elements constructed of porous paper are normally discarded at regular intervals and replaced with new filtering elements. In a hydraulic system that has a reservoir pressurized with turbine engine compressor bleed air, which unit reduces the air pressure between the engine and reservoir? Air pressure regulator. Where can information be obtained about the compatibility of fire-resistant hydraulic fluid with aircraft materials? Fluid manufacturers' technical bulletins. How many of these seals are used with petroleum-based hydraulic fluids? Neoprene, Buna N. The air that is expended and no longer needed when an actuating unit is operated in a pneumatic system is exhausted or dumped, usually overboard. After a hydraulic accumulator has been installed and air chamber charged, the main system hydraulic pressure gauge will not show a hydraulic pressure reading until the fluid side of the accumulator has been charged. Extrusion of an O-ring seal is prevented in a high-pressure system by the use of a backup ring on the side of the O-ring away from the pressure. If hydraulic fluid is released when the air valve core of the accumulator is depressed, it is evidence of a ruptured diaphragm or leaking seals. Which of the following is adversely affected by atmospheric humidity if left unprotected? Skydroll hydraulic fluid. A flexible sealing element subject to motion is a packing. Characteristics of MLH 7644 hydraulic fluid are blue color, vegetable base, will burn, natural rubber seals. What safety device is usually located between the driving unit and hydraulic pump drive shaft? Pump drive coupling shear section. What device in a hydraulic system with a constant delivery pump allows circulation of the fluid when no demands are on the system? Pressure regulator. If an aircraft's constant pressure hydraulic system cycles more frequently than usual and no fluid leakage can be detected, the most probable cause is low accumulator air preload. A pilot reports that when the hydraulic pump is running, the pressure is normal. However, when the pump is stopped, no hydraulic pressure is available. This is an indication of a leaking accumulator air valve. Which of the following allows fluid to flow unimpeded in one direction, but prevents fluid flow in the other direction? Check valve. How can the proper hydraulic fluid to be used in an airplane be determined? By consulting the aircraft manufacturer's service manual. Quick disconnect couplings in hydraulic systems provide a means of quickly connecting and disconnecting hydraulic lines without loss of fluid or entrance of air into the system. The internal resistance of a fluid, which tends to prevent it from flowing, is called viscosity. How would the air pressure charge in the accumulator be determined if the engine is inoperative, but the system still has hydraulic pressure? Operate a hydraulic unit slowly, and note the pressure at which a rapid pressure drop begins as it goes towards zero. Which characteristics apply to aircraft hydraulic systems? Minimum maintenance requirements, lightweight, and simple to inspect. The purpose of restrictors in hydraulic systems is to control the rate of movement of hydraulically operated mechanisms. Phosphate ester base hydraulic fluid is very susceptible to contamination from water in the atmosphere. What function does the absolute pressure regulator perform in the pneumatic power system? Regulates the compressor inlet air to provide a stabilized source of air for the compressor. Pneumatic systems utilize relief valves. Characteristics of MLH 8446 hydraulic fluid are light purple color, phosphate ester base, fire-resistant, butyl rubber seals. Which statement about fluids is correct? All fluids readily transmit pressure. A worn hydraulic pump shaft seal can normally be detected by hydraulic fluid flowing from the pump drain line. A common cause of slow actuation of hydraulic components is internal leakage in the actuating unit. In a gear-type hydraulic pump, a mechanical safety device incorporated to protect the pump from overload is the shear pin. Hat is the purpose of using backup rings with O-rings in hydraulic systems above 1,500 psi. And prevent high pressure from extruding the seal between the moving and stationary part. What is commonly used to connect an emergency source of power, and at the same time, disconnect the normal hydraulic source from critical parts of a landing gear or wheel braking system for operation, usually when the normal source system fails. Shuttle valve. If two actuating cylinders which have the same cross-sectional area but different lengths of stroke are connected to the same source of hydraulic pressure, they will exert equal amounts of force and will move at the same rate of speed. The component in the hydraulic system that is used to direct the flow of fluid is the selector valve. What condition would most likely cause excessive fluctuation of the pressure gauge when the hydraulic pump is operating? Inadequate supply of fluid. A hydraulic system referred to as a power pack system will have all hydraulic power components located in one unit. The hydraulic component that automatically directs fluid from either the normal source or an emergency source to an actuating cylinder is called a shuttle valve. A hydraulic accumulator is charged with an air preload of 1,000 psi. When a hydraulic system pressure of 3,000 psi is developed, the pressure on the air side of the accumulator will be 3,000 psi. A hydraulic motor converts fluid pressure to rotary motion. Generally, the first step in removing an accumulator from an aircraft is to relieve system pressure. Many hydraulic reservoirs contain a small quantity of fluid which is not available to the main system pump. This fluid is retained to supply fluid to the auxiliary pump. To check the air charge in a hydraulic accumulator, reduce all hydraulic pressure, then observe the reading on the accumulator air gauge. In a typical high-pressure pneumatic system, if the moisture separator does not vent accumulated water when the compressor shuts down, a likely cause is a malfunctioning solenoid dump valve. The purpose of a hydraulic pressure regulator is to relieve the pump of its load when no actuating units are being operated. If an aircraft hydraulic system requires mineral-based hydraulic fluid, but phosphate ester-based hydraulic fluid is used, what will be the effect on the system? System will be contaminated, fluids will not blend, and the seals will fail. An O-ring intended for use in a hydraulic system using MIL-H 5606 mineral-based fluid will be marked with a blue stripe or dot. Two types of hydraulic fluids currently being used in civil aircraft are mineral base and phosphate ester base, which is a characteristic of petroleum-based hydraulic fluid. Flammable under normal conditions. Heat exchanger cooling units are required in some aircraft hydraulic systems because of high pressures and high rates of fluid flow. Pressure is a term used to indicate the force per unit area. Pressure is usually expressed in pounds per square inch. Using a hand pump, pressure of 100 psi has been built up in a hydraulic system. The hand pump piston is 1 inch in diameter. A 1-2-inch line connects the hand pump to an actuating cylinder 2 inches in diameter. What is the pressure in the line between the hand pump and the actuator? 100 psi. Before removing the filler cap of a pressurized hydraulic reservoir, in order to service the system, you must relieve the air pressure. If it is necessary to adjust several pressure-regulating valves in a hydraulic system, what particular sequence, if any, should be followed? Units with the highest pressure settings are adjusted first. Which illustrations show the correct spiral for Teflon backup rings? 1 and 3. Which of the following lists only desirable properties of a good hydraulic fluid that has chemical stability? Low viscosity, high flash point, high fire point. Select the valve used in a hydraulic system that directs pressurized fluid to one end of an actuating cylinder and simultaneously directs return fluid to the reservoir from the other end. Selector. The primary purpose of a hydraulic actuating unit is to transform fluid pressure into useful work. Hydraulic fluid reservoirs are sometimes designed with a standpipe in one of the outlet ports in order to assure emergency supply of fluid. The outlet port with the standpipe in it furnishes fluid to the normal system power pump. When servicing aircraft hydraulic systems, use the type fluid specified in the aircraft manufacturer's maintenance manual or instruction plate affixed to the unit. The purpose of the pressure regulator in a hydraulic system is to maintain system operating pressure within a predetermined range and to unload the pump. A filter incorporating specially treated cellulose paper is identified as a micronic filter. What is the viscosity of hydraulic fluid? The internal resistance of a fluid which tends to prevent it from flowing. Severe kickback of the emergency hydraulic hand pump handle during the normal intake stroke will indicate which of the following. The hand pump outlet check valve is sticking open. One of the main advantages of Skydroll is its wide operating temperature. Which seals are used with petroleum-based hydraulic fluids? Bunaen, A flexible hydraulic hose identified as MIL H8788 will have a stripe running the length of the hose. This stripe is installed without excessive twisting. Components containing phosphate ester base hydraulic fluid may be cleaned with Stoddard solvent. What type of packings should be used in hydraulic components to be installed in a system containing skydroll? Packing materials made for ester base fluids. If the hydraulic system pressure is normal while the engine-driven pump is running, but there is no pressure after the engine has been shut off, it indicates no air pressure in the accumulator. The installation of a new metal hydraulic line should be made with enough bends to allow the tube to expand and contract with temperature changes and to absorb vibration. Which seal material is used with phosphate ester base hydraulic fluids? Butyl rubber. Unloading valves are used with many engine-driven hydraulic pumps to relieve the pump pressure, which is a characteristic of synthetic base hydraulic fluid. High flash point. What is one advantage of piston-type hydraulic motors over electric motors? There is no fire hazard if the motor is stalled. An aircraft pneumatic system, which incorporates an engine-driven multi-stage reciprocating compressor, also requires a moisture separator. Hydraulic system accumulators serve which of the following functions? Supplement the system pump when demand is beyond the pump's capacity and store power for limited operation of components if the pump is not operating. A fully charged hydraulic accumulator provides a source for additional hydraulic power when heavy demands are placed on the system. Petroleum-based hydraulic fluid is which color? Red. What is used to flush a system normally serviced with MALH 5606 hydraulic fluid? Naphtha or Varsol. A unit which transforms hydraulic pressure into linear motion is called an actuating cylinder, which must be done before adjusting the relief valve of a main hydraulic system incorporating a pressure regulator. Eliminate the action of the unloading valve. Although dents in the heel of a bend are not permissible, they are acceptable in the remainder of a hydraulic tube providing they are less than what percent of the tube diameter? 20%. Teflon hose that has developed a permanent set from being exposed to high pressure or temperature should not be straightened or bent further. Materials which are skydroll compatible or resistant include common aircraft metals, polyurethane, and epoxy paints. To protect seals from damage when installed over a threaded section, the threaded section should be covered with a suitable sleeve. A cross-flow valve, which is designed to bypass fluid from one side of an actuating cylinder to the other side under certain conditions, may be found in some aircraft installed in the landing gear system. Some hydraulic systems incorporate a device which is designed to remain open to allow a normal fluid flow in the line, but closed if the fluid flow increases above an established rate. This device is generally referred to as a hydraulic fuse. If an engine-driven hydraulic pump of the correct capacity fails to maintain normal system pressure during the operation of a cowl flap actuating unit, the probable cause is restriction in the pump outlet. The cabin pressure control setting has a direct influence upon the outflow valve opening. An aircraft oxygen bottle may be considered airworthy if it has been hydrostatically tested and identified, with the test date, DOT number, and serial number stamped on the cylinder near the neck. When refrigerant 12 is passed over an open flame, it changes to phosgene gas. The point at which freon flowing through a vapor cycle cooling system gives up heat and changes from a gas to a liquid is the condenser. What controls the operation of the cabin pressure regulator? Cabin altitude. Which oxygen system employs a regulator that operates only when the user inhales? Demand flow system. What is the condition of the refrigerant as it enters the condenser of a vapor cycle cooling system? High pressure vapor. What type of oil is suitable for use in vapor cycle cooling system? Special high-grade refrigeration oil. When servicing an air conditioning system that has lost all of its freon, it is necessary to check oil and add as necessary, evacuate the system, and add freon. How is the cabin pressure of an aircraft maintained in flight? By controlling the rate of the air flowing out of the cabin. The component that determines the pressure level in the cabin is the cabin air pressure. Outflow valve. The purpose of the airflow metering aneroid assembly, found in oxygen diluter demand regulators, is to regulate airflow in relation to cabin altitude when in diluter demand position. The basic air cycle cooling system consists of a source of compressed air, heat exchangers, and a turbine. What's the main cause of contamination in a gaseous oxygen system? Moisture. An aircraft pressurization cycle is normally considered to be One complete series of events or operations that recur regularly. Which best describes cabin differential pressure? Difference between the ambient and internal air pressure. What component in a vapor cycle cooling system would most likely be at fault if a system would not take a Freon charge? Expansion valve. Hot compressor bleed air operates the conditioned air system on some turbine aircraft. Cold air supplied by the air cycle air conditioning. If a high-pressure oxygen cylinder is to be installed in an airplane, it must meet the specifications of the Department of Transportation. The primary function of the cabin pressurization system outflow valve is to maintain the desired cabin pressure. When purging a Freon air conditioning system, it is important to release the charge at a slow rate. What is the reason for the slow rate discharge? Prevent excessive loss of refrigerant oil. When a vapor cycle cooling system is not in operation, what is an indication that the system is leaking Freon? Oil seepage. If oxygen bottle pressure is allowed to drop below a specified minimum, it may cause moisture to collect in the bottle. What may be used as a lubricant on oxygen system tapered pipe thread connections? Teflon tape. When an aircraft's oxygen system has developed a leak, the lines and fittings should be bubble tested with a special soap solution manufactured specifically for this purpose. What controls the amount of oxygen delivered to a mask in a continuous flow oxygen system? Calibrated orifice. Composite oxygen bottles that conform to DOTE 8162 have a service life of 15 years or 10,000 filling cycles, whichever occurs first. What test is used to determine the serviceability of an oxygen cylinder? Pressure test with water. The cabin pressurization modes of operation are differential, unpressurized, and isobaric. Frost or ice buildup on a vapor cycle cooling system evaporator would most likely be caused by inadequate airflow through the evaporator. The function of the evaporator in a Freon cooling system is to lower the temperature of the cabin air. The evacuation of a vapor cycle cooling system removes any water that may be present by lowering the boiling point of the water and drawing out the vapor. The operation of an aircraft combustion heater is usually controlled by a thermostat circuit, which alternately turns the fuel on and off, a process known as cycling. Which of the following are characteristics of a chemical or solid-state oxygen system? A volume storage capacity about 3 times that of compressed oxygen and system generators that are inert below 400 degree F, even under severe impact. To be eligible for recharging, a DOTE 3 HT oxygen cylinder must have been hydrostatically tested every 3 years and be retired from service after 24 years or 4,380 filling cycles. On transport category aircraft, what might be an indication of an overpressure event of the aircraft oxygen system? The green thermal expansion disk missing. The primary difference between aviation breathing oxygen and other types of commercially available compressed oxygen is that aviation breathing oxygen has had all the water vapor removed. What is the purpose of pressurizing the aircraft cabin? To make human flight possible in the hostile environment of the upper atmosphere. The purpose of the dump valve in a pressurized aircraft is to relieve all positive pressure from the cabin. Oxygen systems in unpressurized aircraft are generally of the continuous flow and pressure demand types. Where does the last stage of cooling in an air cycle air conditioning system occur? Expansion turbine. How can it be determined that a vapor cycle cooling system is charged with the proper amount of Freon? Air bubbles in the sight glass disappear. In an operating vapor cycle cooling system, if the 2 lines connected to the expansion valve are essentially the same temperature, what does this indicate? The expansion valve is not metering Freon properly. In a gaseous oxygen system, which of the following are vented to blow out plugs in the fuselage skin? Pressure relief valves. The function of the condenser in a Freon cooling system is to transfer heat from the Freon gas to ambient air. When charging a vapor cycle cooling system after evacuation, the low-pressure gauge fails to come out of a vacuum. What is indicated? Blockage in the system. On some cabin pressurization systems, pressurization on the ground is restricted by the main landing gear operated switch. If the liquid level gauge in a vapor cycle cooling system indicates a low Freon charge, the system should be operated for a period of time to reach a stable condition and then the Freon level rechecked. which is considered a good practice concerning the inspection of heating and exhaust systems of aircraft utilizing a jacket around the engine exhaust as a heat source. Supplement physical inspections with periodic operational carbon monoxide detection tests. The air cycle cooling system produces cold air by extracting heat energy across an expansion turbine. What is used in some oxygen systems to change high cylinder pressure to low system pressure? Pressure reducer valve. How should you determine the amount of oxygen in a portable high-pressure cylinder? Woo. Read the pressure gauge mounted on the cylinder. What is ventilating air used for on a combustion heater? Carries heat to the places where needed. Which section of a turbine engine provides high-pressure bleed air to an air cycle machine for pressurization and air conditioning? Low or high-pressure compressor. What component of a pressurization system prevents the cabin altitude from becoming higher than airplane altitude? Negative pressure relief valve. How often should standard weight high pressure oxygen cylinders be hydrostatically tested? Every 5 years. A small amount of water in a vapor cycle cooling system can freeze in the expansion valve and stop the entire system operation. If the cabin rate of climb is too great, the controls should be adjusted to cause the outflow valve to close faster. Determine what unit is located immediately downstream of the expansion valve in a Freon refrigeration system. Evaporator coils. Before a high-pressure oxygen cylinder is serviced, it must be the correct type and have been hydrostatically tested within the proper time interval. What is the condition of the refrigerant as it enters the evaporator of a vapor cycle cooling system? Low-pressure liquid. In a high-pressure oxygen system, if the pressure reducer fails, what prevents high-pressure oxygen from entering the system downstream? Pressure relief valve, which prevents a sudden loss of pressurization in the event that there is a loss of the pressurization source. Delivery air duct check valve, for use in pressurized aircraft, which is generally the least complicated and requires the least maintenance. Chemical oxygen generator systems. At which component in an air cycle cooling system does air undergo a pressure and temperature drop? Expansion tube. Oxygen used in aircraft systems is at least 99.5% pure and is practically water-free. In the combustion heater combustion air system, what prevents too much air from entering the heaters as air pressure increases? Either a combustion air relief valve or a differential pressure regulator. How is the cabin pressure of a pressurized aircraft usually controlled? By an automatic outflow valve that dumps all the pressure in excess of the amount for which it is set. In a Freon vapor cycle cooling system, where is cooling air obtained for the condenser? Ambient air. The point at which Freon flowing through a vapor cycle cooling system absorbs heat and changes from a liquid to a gas is the evaporator. A pressurization controller uses barometric pressure, cabin altitude, and cabin rate of change. What is the condition of the refrigerant as it leaves the evaporator of a vapor cycle cooling system? Low pressure vapor. High-pressure cylinders containing oxygen for aviation use can be identified by their green color and the words "Aviators breathing oxygen" stenciled in 1-inch white letters. After cleaning or replacing the filtering element in a combustion heater fuel system, the system should be pressurized and all connections checked for leaks. The purpose of a subcooler in a vapor cycle cooling system is to cool the Freon to prevent premature vaporization. What does a steady stream of bubbles indicate when servicing a vapor cycle air conditioning system? The system is undercharged. The function of an expansion valve in a Freon cooling system is to act as a metering device and to reduce the pressure of the liquid Freon. In the diluter demand oxygen regulator, when does the demand valve operate? When the user breathes. What is the condition of the refrigerant as it leaves the condenser of a vapor cycle cooling system? A high-pressure liquid. 1 hour after an oxygen system was charged for a leakage check, the oxygen pressure gauge read 460 psi at 63 degrees Fahrenheit. 6 hours later, the temperature was 51 degree F. A 5 psi change is the maximum allowable in a 6-hour period. What pressure gauge readings would be acceptable to remain within the allowable limits? 445 to 450 psi. What unit in a vapor cycle cooling system serves as a reservoir for the refrigerant? Receiver dryer. One purpose of a jet pump in a pressurization and air conditioning system is to provide for augmentation of airflow in some areas of the aircraft. The position of the thermostatic expansion valve in a vapor cycle cooling system is determined by temperature and pressure of the freon in the outlet of the evaporator. Turbine engine air used for air conditioning and pressurization is generally called bleed air. A contaminated oxygen system is normally purged with oxygen. In what position should the bottle be placed when adding liquid freon to a vapor cycle cooling system? Vertical with the outlet at the bottom. What is the purpose of a mixing valve in a compressor bleed air conditioning system? Control the supply of hot, cool, and cold air. What component might possibly be damaged if liquid refrigerant is introduced into the low side of a vapor cycle cooling system when the pressure is too high or the outside air temperature is too low? Compressor. Turbine engine exhaust gas temperatures are measured by using Cromwell-Alumel thermocouples. What marking color is used to indicate if a cover glass has slipped? White. An aircraft instrument panel is electrically bonded to the aircraft structure to provide current return paths. Stall warning systems are generally designed to begin warning the pilot when a stall is imminent. The lubber line on a directional gyro is used to represent the nose of the aircraft. Which instruments are connected to an aircraft's pitot static system? Vertical speed indicator, altimeter, and airspeed indicator. How is a flangeless instrument case mounted in an instrument panel? By an expanding type clamp secured to the back of the panel and tightened by a screw from the front of the instrument panel. A Borden tube instrument may be used to indicate pressure and temperature. The function of a CRT in an EFIS is to display alphanumeric data and representations of aircraft instruments. What does a reciprocating engine manifold pressure gauge indicate when the engine is not operating? The existing atmospheric pressure. Where may a person look for the information necessary to determine the required markings on an engine instrument? Aircraft flight manual or aircraft maintenance manual. Aircraft temperature thermocouple leads may not be altered and are designed for a specific installation. Which instrument condition is acceptable and would not require correction? Case paint chipped. The green arc on an aircraft temperature gauge indicates the desirable temperature range. Resistance-type temperature indicators using Wheatstone bridge or ratiometer circuits may be used to indicate the temperatures of which of the following? Free air, carburetor air, coolant, engine, and oil temperature. When an unpressurized aircraft's static pressure system is leak-checked to comply with the requirements of 14 CFR 91.411, what aircraft instrument may be used in lieu of a pitot static system tester? Altimeter. How many of the following are controlled by gyroscopes? 1. Attitude indicator. 2. Heading indicator. 3. Turn needle of the turn and slip indicator. 3. When an airplane's primary flight control surfaces are set for a particular phase of flight, such as landing or takeoff, the corresponding control surface indicating system will show trim position. What is the fixed line mark attached to the compass bowl of a magnetic compass called? Lubber line. A certificated mechanic with airframe and power plant ratings may not perform repairs to aircraft instruments. Which of the following will cause inaccuracies in a magnetic compass that may be compensated for by an aircraft mechanic? Deviation. The maximum deviation during level flight permitted in a compensated magnetic direction indicator installed on an aircraft certificated under 14 CFR Part 23 is 10 degree. A certificated mechanic with at least an airframe rating may perform inspections and function checks on aircraft instruments. The method of mounting aircraft instruments in their respective panels depends on the design of the instrument case. A certificated mechanic may perform 100-hour inspections of instruments. When performing this static system leakage check required by 14 CFR 91.411, the technician utilizes negative pressure. Aircraft instrument value should be marked and graduated in accordance with the specific aircraft maintenance or flight manual. Who is authorized to repair an aircraft instrument? A certificated repair station approved for that class instrument. The primary purpose of a takeoff warning system is to alert the crew that a monitored flight control is not properly set prior to takeoff. The system is activated by thrust lever data transmitted between components in an EFIS are converted into digital signals. How would an airspeed indicator be marked to show the best rate of climb speed? One engine inoperative. A blue radial line. The function of a display controller in an EFIS is to allow the pilot to select the appropriate system configuration for the current flight situation. An airspeed indicator measures the differential between pitot and static air pressure. A typical takeoff warning indication system, in addition to throttle setting, monitors the position of which of the following: elevators, speed brake, flaps, and stabilizer trim. Aircraft instrument panels are generally shock-mounted to absorb low-frequency, high-amplitude shocks. At sea level, when the average atmospheric pressure is 14.7 psi, the barometric pressure is 29.92 H. The operation of an angle of attack indicating system is based on detection of differential pressure at a point where the airstream flows in a direction, not parallel to the true angle of attack of the aircraft. When selecting hardware for attaching bonding connections to an aircraft structure, which of the following should be considered? Mechanical strength, ease of installation, amount of current to be carried. Which of the following instruments will normally have range markings? Cylinder head temperature gauge and airspeed indicator. Magnetic compass bowls are filled with a liquid to dampen the oscillation of the float. The function of a symbol generator, SG, in an EFIS is to receive and process input signals from aircraft and engine sensors and send the data to the appropriate display. The pneumatic reed-type stall warning system installed in some light aircraft is activated by negative air pressure. Which statement regarding an aircraft instrument vacuum system is true? Dry-type vacuum pumps with carbon vanes are very susceptible to damage from solid airborne particles and must take in only filtered air. Fuel flow transmitters are designed to transmit data. Electrically bonding connections should be tested for resistance value. What will be the result if the instrument static pressure line becomes disconnected inside a pressurized cabin during cruising flight? The altimeter and airspeed indicator will both read low. Cases for electrically operated instruments are made of iron or steel cases. The maximum altitude loss permitted during an unpressurized aircraft instrument static pressure system integrity check is 100 feet in 1 minute. The requirements for testing and inspection of instrument static systems required by 14 CFR 91.411 are contained in Part 43, Appendix E. Which instruments are connected to an aircraft's static pressure system only? Vertical speed indicator and altimeter. A turn coordinator instrument indicates both roll and yaw. When installing an instrument in an aircraft, who is responsible for making sure it is properly marked? The mechanic installing the instrument. The red radial lines on the face of an engine oil pressure gauge indicates minimum and slash or maximum safe operating limits. Which of the following causes of aircraft magnetic compass inaccuracies may be compensated for by mechanics? Deviation. A synchro transmitter is connected to a synchro receiver, electrically with wires. Instrument static system leakage can be detected by observing the rate of change. An indication of the altimeter after suction has been applied to the static system to cause a prescribed equivalent altitude to be indicated. Which condition would be most likely to cause excessive vacuum in a vacuum system? Vacuum relief valve improperly adjusted. An aircraft magnetic compass is swung to update the compass correction card when equipment is added that could affect compass deviation. The angle of attack detector operates from differential pressure when the airstream is not parallel to the true angle of attack of the aircraft instrument panel. Shock mounts absorb low-frequency, high-amplitude shocks. What must be done to an instrument panel that is supported by shock mounts? Bonding straps must be installed across the instrument mounts as a current path. A barometric altimeter indicates pressure altitude when the barometric scale is set at 29.92 Hg. When an aircraft altimeter is set at 29.92 Hg on the ground, the altimeter will read pressure altitude. Which of the following operating mechanisms would be found in a hydraulic pressure gauge? Borden tube. Which procedure should you use if you find a vacuum-operated instrument glass loose? Install another instrument. If a static pressure system check reveals excessive leakage, the leaks may be located by isolating portions of the line and testing each portion systematically starting at the instrument connections. Which of the following instrument discrepancies would require replacement of the instrument? Case leaking, glass cracked, instrument will not zero out, or fogged. How should a coaxial cable be routed? As directly as possible. What kind of antenna is this? A radar beacon transponder antenna. What is the approximate drag load on an antenna with a frontal area of 0.137 square feet installed on an aircraft with a speed of 275 miles per hour? 3.387 pounds. A radar altimeter indicates altitude above ground level. When must the emergency locator transmitter (ELT) battery be replaced, other than reading the replacement date? When the transmitter has been in use for more than one cumulative hour. After an automatic direction finding antenna has been installed, the loop must be calibrated. Which channel of an autopilot detects changes in pitch attitude of an aircraft? Elevator. When must the radio station license be displayed in an aircraft equipped with a two-way radio? When the aircraft is operated outside the United States. What kind of antenna is this? A lightning detector system antenna. When would a U.S. resident not be required to hold a Federal Communications Commission, FCC, restricted radio telephone operator permit to operate two-way aircraft VHF radio equipment? When flying or communicating within the United States. The addition of avionics and associated antenna systems forward of the CG limit will affect empty weight and useful load. The preferred location of an ELT is as far aft as possible, but forward of the empennage. Which of the following provides manual maneuverability of the aircraft while the autopilot is engaged? Flight controller. In an autopilot, which signal nullifies the input signal to the ailerons? Follow-up signal. What is the primary purpose of an autopilot? To relieve the pilot of control of the aircraft during long periods of flight. Installed radio equipment is protected from damage due to jolts and vibration by shock mounts. How may the battery replacement date be verified for an emergency locator transmitter, ELT? By observing the battery replacement date marked on the outside of the transmitter. How may the operation of an installed emergency locator transmitter, ELT, be verified during aircraft inspection? By tuning a communications receiver to the civil emergency frequency and activating the ELT momentarily within 5 minutes after the hour. What kind of antenna is this? A VOR and localizer antenna. When bending coaxial cable, the bend radius should be at least 10 times the diameter of the cable. What kind of antenna is this? A VOR glide slope antenna. An emergency locator transmitter, ELT battery, must be capable of furnishing power for signal transmission for at least 48 hours. When flags such as NAV, HDG, or GS are displayed on an HSI, the indication is that function is inoperative. What characteristics of the installation of a rigid antenna on a vertical stabilizer should be evaluated? Flutter and vibration. What kind of antenna is this? Loop and sense antenna. What kind of antenna is this? An ELT antenna. What is this antenna used for? This is an altitude encoder used with transponders. Part of the ADF system used on aircraft includes sense and loop antennas, in which control element of an autopilot system is an attitude indicator. Sensing. When operationally checking an autopilot system on the ground, after the aircraft's main power has been switched on, the autopilot should be engaged only after the gyros come up to speed and the amplifier warms up. In general, the purpose of an aircraft transponder is to receive an interrogation signal from a ground station and automatically send a reply back. When testing an emergency locator transmitter, ELT, a 50 ohm dummy load, is connected in place of the antenna to prevent the signal from being radiated into space. What will occur if an aircraft attitude is changed by its autopilot system in order to correct for an error and the involved control surfaces are returned to streamline by the time the aircraft has reached its correct position? Normal operation. What kind of antenna is this? A VOR glide slope antenna. A DME antenna should be installed on the aircraft in a position that will not be blanked out by the wing when the aircraft is banked. When an antenna is installed, it should be fastened, so that loads imposed are transmitted to the aircraft structure. A gasket or sealant is used between the antenna mast and fuselage skin to prevent the entry of moisture. Static dischargers help eliminate radio interference by dissipating static electricity into the atmosphere at low current levels. What is the operating principle of the sensing device used in an autopilot system? The relative motion between a gyro and its supporting system. What is the main purpose of a servo in an autopilot system? Move the control surface as commanded. Now, what is the approximate drag load on an antenna with a frontal area of 0.125 square feet installed on an aircraft with a speed of 225 miles per hour? 2.069 pounds. What component of an autopilot system applies torque to the control surfaces of an aircraft? Servo. Where is the strongest signal for this antenna? Above the antenna. Which of the antennas shown is a typical glide slope antenna? 2. The elevator channel of an autopilot controls the aircraft about which axis of rotation? Lateral. A fully integrated autopilot controls the aircraft around how many axes? 3. When installing coaxial cable, it should be secured firmly along its entire length, at 2-foot intervals. Which of the following is a two-way text communication link between an airliner in flight and the airline's main ground facilities? Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System, ACARS. The preferred location of a VOR antenna on light aircraft is on top of the cabin with the apex of the V pointing forward. What kind of antenna is this? A canted antenna. VHF radio signals are commonly used in both VOR navigation and ATC communications. When installing a DME antenna, it should be aligned with the center line on the airplane. Radio equipment is bonded to the aircraft in order to provide a low impedance ground and minimize radio interference from static electrical charges. What kind of antenna is this? A radar beacon transponder antenna. Doublers are used when antennas are installed to reinstate the structural strength of the aircraft's skin. When testing a 406 MHz emergency locator transmitter, ELT, care must be taken as the unit could send an emergency signal, activating search and rescue, SAR, agencies. Show explanation. Exit. Aircraft antenna must be grounded to the airframe. How much clearance from the seat bottom is required when installing radio equipment under a seat? 1 inch with the seat occupied and subjected to maximum downward seat spring deflection. What kind of antenna is this? A marker beacon receiver antenna. In the landing configuration, GPWS typically monitors the radio, radar, altimeter, air data computer, instrument landing system, and landing gear and flat positions. What component is the sensing device in an electromechanical autopilot system? Gyro. The purpose of a glide slope system is to assist the pilot in making a correct angle of descent to the runway. An emergency locator transmitter, ELT, is normally activated by an inertial switch or equivalent mechanism if subjected to a force of a prescribed intensity and duration. It must activate when the force is applied, parallel to the longitudinal axis of the aircraft. The purpose of a localizer is to align the airplane with the center of the runway. One antenna can be used for the radio range and standard broadcast bands in light aircraft because the two ranges are close together. What kind of antenna is this? A dipole antenna. Which of the antennas shown is a typical DME antenna? 1. A radar altimeter determines altitude by transmitting a signal and receiving back a reflected signal. On modern large aircraft, what electronic device typically monitors flight parameters and performs autopilot functions? Flight management computer. A fuel pressure warning switch contacts close and warning light is turned on when the fuel pressure drops below specified limits. What type of fuel booster pump requires a pressure relief valve? Sliding vane. What is the minimum distance allowed between a fuel tank and the firewall separating the engine? 1/2 inch. What is the dielectric, non-conducting material in a capacitance-type fuel quantity indicating system? Fuel and air in the tank. The primary purpose of an aircraft's fuel jettison system is to quickly achieve a lower landing weight. On a large aircraft pressure refueling system, a pressure refueling receptacle and control panel will permit one person to fuel or defuel any of the tanks on an aircraft. What method is used on turbine-powered aircraft to determine when the condition of the fuel is approaching the danger of forming ice crystals? Fuel temperature indicator. What flight safety-related advantage does a pressure fueling system provide? Reduces the chances for fuel contamination. A fuel pressure relief valve is required on an aircraft. Positive displacement fuel pump. One advantage of electrical and electronic fuel quantity indicating systems is that the indicator can be located any distance from the tanks. How may the anti-knock characteristics of a fuel be improved? By adding a knock inhibitor. Which procedure must be followed when defueling aircraft with swept-back wings? Defuel the outboard wing tanks first. Which aircraft fuel quantity indicating system incorporates a signal amplifier? Electronic. What is one disadvantage of using aromatic aviation fuels? Deteriorates rubber parts. The fuel jettison valve must be designed to allow flight personnel to close the valve at any time, and the fuel must discharge clear of the aircraft. How many engine-driven fuel pumps per engine are required for engines requiring fuel pumps? 1 fuel pump for each engine. What markings must be placed on or near each appropriate fuel filler cover on standard category aircraft? The word avgas and the minimum fuel grade. The probe of a capacitance-type fuel level gauge is essentially a capacitor with fuel and air acting as a dielectric. Fuel boost pumps are operated to provide a positive flow of fuel to the engine. What is the purpose of a float-operated transmitter installed in a fuel tank? It sends an electric signal to the fuel quantity indicator. The purpose of the baffle plate in a fuel tank is to resist fuel surging within the fuel tank. When inspecting a removable rigid fuel tank for leaks, what procedure should be followed? Pressurize the tank with air and brush with soapy water. The location of leaks and defects within the internal portions of the fuel system can usually be determined by observing the pressure gauge and operating the selector valves. 1. A fuel heater can use engine bleed air as a source of heat. 2. A fuel heater can use engine lubricating oil as a source of heat. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. 1. Gas turbine engine fuel systems are very susceptible to the formation of ice in the fuel filters. 2. A fuel heater operates as a heat exchanger to warm the fuel. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. What should be used to remove flux from an aluminum tank after welded repairs? 5% solution of nitric or sulfuric acid. When routing a fuel line between two rigidly mounted fittings, the line should have at least one bend between such fittings. What precautions must be observed if a gravity feed fuel system is permitted to supply fuel to an engine for more than one tank at a time? The tank airspaces must be interconnected. Which of the following would give the first positive indication that a changeover from one fuel tank to another is needed? Fuel pressure warning. An electrical type fuel quantity indicating system consists of an indicator in the flight deck and a float in the tank that moves a connecting arm to the wiper on a variable resistor in the tank. The use of turbine fuels in aircraft has resulted in some problems not normally associated with aviation gasolines. One of these problems is microbial contaminants. Microbial growth is produced by various forms of microorganisms that live and multiply in the water interfaces of jet fuels. Which of the following could result if microbial growth exists in a jet fuel tank and is not corrected? Interference with fuel flow, interference with fuel quantity indicators, and electrolytic corrosive action in a metal tank. Fuel jettisoning past the limits prescribed by federal aviation regulations is usually prevented by dump limit valves or a low-level circuit. Select one means of controlling the fuel temperature on turbine-powered aircraft. Engine bleed air to a heat exchanger. The vapor pressure of aviation gasoline is lower than the vapor pressure of automotive gasoline. One advantage of electrical and electronic fuel quantity indicating systems is that several fuel tank levels can be read on one indicator. Why are integral fuel tanks used in many large aircraft? To reduce weight. The primary purpose of a fuel tank sump is to provide a place for contaminants and water to settle, with a drain valve to remove the impurities. What is the maximum vapor pressure allowable for an aircraft fuel? 7 psi integral fuel tanks on transport aircraft are supported by the aircraft structure. 1. A fuel pressure gauge is a differential pressure indicator. 2. A fuel pressure gauge indicates the pressure of the fuel entering the carburetor. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. The electronic type fuel quantity indicating system consists of a bridge circuit, an amplifier, an indicator, and a tank unit. Which of the following precautions is most important during refueling operations? Fuel to be used must be appropriately identified. Why is the capacitance fluid quantity indicating system more accurate in measuring fuel level than a mechanical type? It measures by weight instead of volume. Why is the main fuel strainer located at the lowest point in the fuel system? It traps any small amount of water that may be present in the fuel system. A transmitter in a fuel pressure warning system serves what function? Converts fluid pressure to an electrical signal. A fuel totalizer is a component which indicates the amount of fuel in all tanks. Flapper valves are used in fuel tanks to act as check valves. How is the outlet fuel pressure regulated on a submerged, single-speed centrifugal type fuel pump? By the pump's design and internal clearances. Which of the following is employed to maintain lateral stability when jettisoning fuel? 2 separate independent systems. What should be used to inert an integral fuel tank before attempting repairs? CO. 2. What is the recommended practice for cleaning a fuel tank before welding? Steam clean the tank interior. In some aircraft with several fuel tanks, the possible danger of allowing the fuel supply in one tank to become exhausted before the selector valve is switched to another tank is prevented by the installation of a fuel pressure warning signal system. Fuel baffles are installed in tanks to prevent underscore 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 caused by changes in the attitude of the aircraft. No, surging. A probe or a series of probes is used in what kind of fuel quantity indicating system? Capacitor. What is the primary purpose of the crossfeed system? It allows any tank to supply fuel to any engine. Why is it necessary to vent all aircraft fuel tanks? To limit pressure differential between the tank and atmosphere. When an aircraft is fueled from a truck or fuel farm that has not been contaminated, daily draining of strainers and sumps is combined with periodic filter changes and inspection to ensure fuel is contaminant-free. A typical large transport aircraft fuel manifold system allows how many of the following? 1. All tanks can be serviced through a single connection. 2. Any engine can be fed from any tank. 3. All engines can be fed from all tanks simultaneously. 4. A damaged tank can be isolated from the rest of the fuel system. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Why are centrifugal-type boost pumps used in fuel systems of aircraft operating at high altitude? To supply fuel under pressure to engine-driven pumps. To prevent vapor lock in fuel lines at high altitude, some aircraft are equipped with boost pumps. A digital fuel totalizer automatically indicates the amount of fuel used, fuel remaining, current rate of consumption, and fuel weight aboard at takeoff. How many vents, arranged so that they are not likely to become plugged at the same time, must be used in multi-engine fuel systems? 2. What must each fuel quantity indicator be calibrated to read during level flight when the quantity of fuel remaining is equal to the unusable fuel supply? 0. What type of remote reading fuel quantity indicating system has several probes installed in each fuel tank? Electronic. Which statement concerning an electronic capacitance type fuel quantity indicating system is true? It has no moving parts in the tank. If a bladder-type fuel tank is to be left empty for an extended period of time, the inside of the tank should be coated with a film of engine oil. What is used in many aircraft to prevent bubbles in the fuel after it leaves the tank when atmospheric pressure is lower than fuel vapor pressure? Boost pumps. What can be done to eliminate or minimize the microbial growth problem in an aircraft jet fuel tank? Use anti-icing and antibacterial additives. What is the purpose of the pump crossfeed valve? Allow operation of engines from one tank. The presence of fuel stains around a fuel nozzle would indicate clogged fuel nozzle. The type of fuel boost pump that separates air and vapor from the fuel before it enters the line to the carburetor is the centrifugal type pump. A transducer in a fuel pressure system serves what function? Converts fluid pressure directly through a transmitter to the indicator. What method would be used to check for internal leakage of a fuel valve without removing the valve from the aircraft? Place the valve in the off position, drain the strainer bowl, and with boost pump on, watch to see if fuel flows to the strainer bowl. When installing a rigid fuel line 1/2 inch in diameter, at what intervals should the line be supported? 16 inches. Entrained water in aviation turbine fuel is a hazard because of its susceptibility to freezing as it passes through the filters. What are common methods of preventing this hazard? Anti-icing fuel additives and fuel heater. Some turbine-powered aircraft have a fuel temperature indicator located in the flight deck to monitor the fuel temperature during high-altitude flight. What is one purpose of a fuel tank vent? To maintain atmospheric pressure. When fuel quantity is measured in pounds instead of gallons, the measurement will be more accurate because fuel volume varies with temperature change. A drip gauge may be used to measure the amount of fuel in the tank. Why are jet fuels more susceptible to water contamination than aviation gasoline? Jet fuel has a higher viscosity than gasoline. Fuel is moved overboard in most fuel jettison systems by boost pumps. What are the 4 general types of fuel quantity gauges? Sight glass, mechanical, electrical, and electronic. The purpose of a diaphragm in a vane-type fuel pump is to compensate fuel pressures to altitude changes. When defueling an aircraft, which of the following must be accomplished? Always defuel outside the hangar. Which of the following may be used for the repair of fuel leaks on most integral fuel tanks? Riveting and resealing. Where is fuel pressure taken for the pressure warning signal on most aircraft engines? Fuel pressure line of the carburetor. What unit would be adjusted to change the fuel pressure warning limits? Pressure-sensitive mechanism. If it is necessary to enter an aircraft's fuel tank, which procedure should be avoided? Conduct the defueling and tank purging operation in an air-conditioned building. Which of the following would be most useful to locate and troubleshoot an internal fuel leak in an aircraft fuel system? Maintenance manual diagrams and descriptions. Aircraft pressure fueling systems instructional procedures are normally placarded on the fuel control panel access door. Fuel system components must be bonded and grounded in order to drain off static charges. When moving the mixture control on a normally operating engine into the idle cutoff position, engine RPM should slightly increase before the engine starts to die. A fuel jettison system is required under certain conditions if the maximum takeoff weight exceeds the maximum landing weight. What regulations cover the requirements of fuel jettisoning? 14 CFR parts, 23 and 25, and KM 4B. Before fueling an aircraft by using the pressure fueling method, what important precautions should be observed? The truck pump pressure must be correct for that refueling system. Which of the following is necessary to effectively troubleshoot a fuel pressure warning system? The manufacturer's maintenance manuals. Pressure fueling of aircraft is usually accomplished through at least one single-point connection. How does temperature affect fuel weight? Cold fuel is heavier per gallon. A fuel system must be designed to prevent fuel vapor ignition caused by lightning. An aircraft's integral fuel tank is a part of the aircraft structure. Normal fuel cross-feed system operation in multi-engine aircraft provides a means to maintain a balanced fuel load condition. Fuel heaters are used with fuel systems for turbine engines to prevent underscore in the fuel from clogging system filters. Ice crystals. The function of a fuel heater is to protect the engine fuel system from ice formation. As a general rule, which statement is true regarding fuel leaks? Stains, seeps, and heavy seeps, in addition to running leaks, are considered flight hazards when located in unvented areas of the aircraft. According to Part 23, what minimum required markings must be placed at or near each appropriate fuel filler cover for reciprocating engine-powered airplanes? The word avgas and the minimum fuel grade. What's the purpose of flapper-type check valves in integral fuel tanks? To prevent fuel from flowing away from the boost pumps. A capacitance-type fuel quantity indicating system measures fuel in pounds. Which of the following tests can determine an aviation gasoline's tendency to vapor lock? Read vapor pressure test. What unit is generally used to actuate the fuel pressure warning system? Pressure-sensitive mechanism. Which gas is used for purging an aircraft fuel tank? Carbon dioxide. In an electronic-type fuel quantity indicating system, the tank sensing unit is a capacitor. Fuel jettisoning is usually accomplished through a common manifold and outlet in each wing. Which of the following are considered circuit protective devices that are used in aircraft electrical systems? Circuit breakers, fuses, and current limiters. Static inverters are electronic devices that change DC to AC with the use of an oscillator. To help minimize radio interference, a capacitor will largely eliminate and provide a steady direct current if the capacitor is connected to the generator in parallel. When using the voltage drop method of checking circuit resistance, the input voltage must be maintained at a constant value. A voltage regulator controls generator voltage by changing the resistance of the generator field circuit. If a wire is installed so that it comes in contact with some moving parts, what protection should be given the wire? Pass-through conduit. The circuit breaker in the instrument lighting system protects the wiring from too much current. The voltage output of an alternator may be regulated by controlling the voltage output of the DC exciter. How should a voltmeter be connected? In parallel with the load. One purpose of a growler test is to determine the presence of a shorted armature. The rotor in an autosyn remote indicating system uses an electromagnet. What is the advantage of a circuit breaker when compared to a fuse? It is resettable and reusable. The strength of the core of an electromagnet depends upon the material from which it is constructed and which of the following. the number of turns of wire in the coil, and the amount of current, amperes, passing through the coil. Aircraft which operate only AC generators, alternators, as a primary source of electrical power normally provide current suitable for battery charging through the use of a step-down transformer and a rectifier. During inspection of an anti-collision light installation for condition and proper operation, it should be determined that the anti-collision light can be operated independently of the position lights. A voltage regulator controls generator output by varying current flow to generator field coil. What kind of switch should you install in a single wire circuit that required the switch to be manually held in the ON position? Single pole, single throw, SPST, two position normally open, NO. When DC generators are operated in parallel to supply power for a single load, their controls include an equalizer circuit to assure that all generators share the load equally. The equalizer circuit operates by increasing the output of the low generator and decreasing the output of the high generator until they are equal. One advantage of using AC electrical power in aircraft is greater ease in stepping the voltage up or down. What is required when operating two aircraft AC generators in parallel? Frequency and voltage must both be equal. When a diode is checked for an open circuit or a short circuit, it should be disconnected from the circuit. In the American wire gauge, a WG system of numbers used to designate electrical wire sizes, the number assigned to a size is related to its cross-sectional area. And what should be used to protect wires from chafing when they must pass through bulkheads, firewalls, ribs, etc.? Suitable grommet. The starting current of a series-wound DC motor, in passing through both the field and armature windings, produces a high starting torque. What does a rectifier do? Changes alternating current into direct current. What is the minimum bend radius for an electrical wire bundle? 10 times the outside diameter of the bundle. The primary considerations when selecting electric cable size are current carrying capacity and allowable voltage drop. What is the maximum amount of time a circuit can be in operation and still be an intermittent duty circuit? 2 minutes. Which of the following must be accomplished when installing an anti-collision light? Install a switch independent of the position light switch. The major advantages of alternating current, AC, over direct current, DC, is the fact that its current and voltage can easily be increased or decreased by means of a transformer. The pin section of an ANA-MS connector is normally installed on the ground side of a circuit. Which of the following should be accomplished in the installation of aircraft wiring? Locate the bundle above flammable fluid lines and securely clamp to structure. How does the magnetic brake used to stop rotation of an electric motor armature operate? A friction brake is applied by a spring and released by a magnet. The type of electric wire terminals used for most aircraft applications, in addition to providing good current carrying capabilities, are designed primarily to prevent circuit failure due to terminal disconnection. What is normally used to bond non-continuous stainless steel aircraft components? Copper jumpers. Aircraft electrical junction boxes located in a fire zone are usually constructed of stainless steel. In aircraft electrical systems, automatic reset circuit breakers should not be used as circuit protective devices. Electric wiring installed in aircraft without special enclosing means, open wiring, offers the advantages of ease of installation, simple maintenance, and reduced weight. When bundling open wiring, the bundles should be limited as to the number of cables to minimize damage from a single electrical fault. What is a method used for restoring generator field residual magnetism? Flash the fields. To what depth is the mica insulation between the commutator bars of a DC generator undercut? Equal to the width of the mica. If the reverse current cutout relay contact points fail to open after the generator output is dropped below battery potential, current will flow through the generator armature, and opposite the normal direction and through the shunt field in the normal direction. In a generator, what eliminates any possible sparking to the brush guides caused by the movement of the brushes within the holder? The brush pigtail. What is the ratio of turns between the primary coil winding and the secondary coil winding of a transformer designed to triple its input voltage? Primary will have 1/3 as many turns as its secondary. A CSD unit drives a generator through the use of a variable hydraulic pump and hydraulic motor. Electric circuits are protected from overheating by The most common method of attaching a pin or socket to an individual wire in an MSA electrical connector is by crimping. If any one generator in a 24-volt DC system shows low voltage, the most likely cause is an out-of-adjustment voltage regulator. When adding a rheostat to a light circuit to control the light intensity, it should be connected in series with the light. What is the most accurate type of frequency measuring instrument? Integrated circuit chip having a clock circuit. What is the principal advantage of the series wound DC motor? High starting torque. How can it be determined if a transformer winding has some of its turns shorted together? The transformer will get hot in normal operation. Which statement relating to electric wiring is true? When attaching a terminal to the end of an electric cable, it should be determined that the strength of the cable to terminal joint is at least equal to the tensile strength of the cable itself. If a generator is equipped with a vibrator-type voltage regulator, the actual time the voltage regulator points remain open depends on the load carried by the generator. When approved, splices may be used to repair manufactured harnesses or installed wiring. The maximum number of splices permitted between any two connectors is 1. The inductor-type inverter output voltage is controlled by the DC stator field current. How can the direction of rotation of a DC electric motor be changed? Reverse the electrical connections to either the field or armature windings. How many cycles of AC voltage are produced in a 6-pole alternator of the revolving field type for each revolution of the rotor? 3. Residual voltage is a result of magnetism in the field shoes. When considering an alteration, the criteria upon which the selection of electric cable size should be based are current carrying capacity and allowable voltage drop. The only practical method of maintaining a constant voltage output from an aircraft generator under varying conditions of speed and load is to vary the strength of the magnetic field. Where is the generator rating and performance data located? Stamped on the generator data plate. The nominal rating of electrical switches refers to continuous current rating with the contacts closed. Which of the following factors must be taken into consideration when determining the wire size to use for an aircraft installation? Allowable power loss, permissible voltage drop, current carrying capability of the conductor, type of load. Which motor would be most likely to have an armature brake? Landing light retraction motor. When using an ohmmeter to check the continuity of a generator field coil, the coil should show very low resistance if it is a series field coil. Which of the following is most likely to cause thermal runaway in a nickel-cadmium battery? Excessive current draw from the battery. During inspection of the terminal strips of an aircraft electrical system, it should be determined that the terminal studs are anchored against rotation. The voltage in an AC transformer secondary that contains twice as many loops as the primary will be greater and the amperage less than in the primary. A circuit breaker is installed in an aircraft electrical system primarily to protect the circuit and should be located as close to the source as possible. What is the purpose of the selection of derated switches for known continuous load current applications? To obtain reasonable switch efficiency and service life. Microswitches are used primarily as limit switches to control electrical units automatically. Electric wire terminals for most aircraft applications must be what type? Ring. How should the splices be arranged if several are to be located in an electrical wire bundle? Staggered along the length of the bundle. Electrical connectors used in the aircraft assemblies should meet which of the following specifications? Military specifications, MS. What protection to wires and cables does conduit provide when used in aircraft installations? Mechanical. A CSD unit that is disconnected in flight due to a malfunction such as overtemperature may be reconnected only on the ground by maintenance personnel. If the plus terminal of a voltmeter is connected to the terminal of the source voltage and the terminal of the meter is connected to the plus terminal of the source voltage, the voltmeter will read backwards. If several long lengths of electrical cable are to be installed in rigid conduit, the possibility of damage to the cable as it is pulled through the conduit will be reduced by dusting the cable with powdered soapstone. Which of the batteries are connected together incorrectly? 3. The rotor in a Magnuson remote indicating system uses a permanent magnet. An ammeter in a battery charging system is for the purpose of indicating the rate of current used to charge the battery. If one switch is used to control all navigation lights, the lights are most likely connected. parallel to each other and in series with the switch. How is a shunt wound DC generator connected? Both fields are shunted across, connected in parallel with, the armature. Grounding is electrically connecting a conductive object to the primary structure. One purpose of grounding is to prevent development of radio frequency potentials. A battery generator system provides direct current. On installations requiring alternating current from the battery generator system, it is necessary to have an inverter. Which of the following are the major parts of a DC motor? Armature assembly, field assembly, brush assembly, and end frame. Some electric motors have two sets of field windings wound in opposite directions so that the motor can be operated in either direction. If the integrated drive generator IDG scavenge oil filter is contaminated with metal, you should remove and replace IDG. What is the frequency of an alternator dependent upon? RPM. The most common method of regulating the voltage output of a compound DC generator is to vary the current flowing through the shunt field coils. Aircraft fuse capacity is rated in amperes. If it is necessary to use an electrical connector where it may be exposed to moisture, the mechanic should use a special moisture-proof type. During ground operation, aircraft generator cooling is usually accomplished by integral fan. How are generators rated? Amperes at rated voltage. Why are the iron cores of most induction coils laminated? To reduce the effects of eddy currents. What is an important factor in selecting aircraft fuses? Capacity matches the needs of the circuit. Integrated drive generators, IDG, employ a type of high-output AC generator that utilizes a brushless system to produce current. An aircraft electrical circuit control relay is an electronically operated switch. 1. There are three basic types of DC motors: series, shunt, and compound. 2. In the series motor, the field windings, consisting of relatively few turns of heavy wire, are connected in series with the armature winding. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. Aluminum wire must be stripped very carefully because individual strands will break easily after being nicked. The basic difference between an autosyn and a magnesyn indicating system is the rotor. If the positive field lead between a generator and a generator control panel breaks and is shorted while the engine is running, a voltmeter connected to generator output would indicate residual voltage. A circuit protection device called a current limiter is essentially a slow-blow fuse and is designed to be used in heavy power circuits. Which type of DC generator is not used as an airplane generator? Series wound. The method most often used in overcoming the effect of armature reaction is through the use of interpoles. Upon completion of the landing gear extension cycle, the green light illuminated and the red light remained lit. What is the probable cause? Short in the up-limit switch. In order for the red light to remain on when the landing gear is down and locked, there must be a short in the up-limit switch that keeps wire 19 electrically connected to wire 8. This keeps power supplied to the red light. Which of the following copper electrical cable sizes should be selected to replace a number 6? Aluminum electrical cable? No, 6. What is the color and orientation of the position lights for navigation on civil airplanes? Left side red, right side green, rear aft white. What is the voltage drop for a number 18 copper wire, 50 feet long, to carry 12.5 amperes, continuous operation? Use the formula VD equals sign, RLAVD equals sign, voltage drop. R equals sign, resistance per foot equals sign 0.00644. L equals sign, length of wire. A equals sign, amperes, 4V. VD equals sign, RLA equals sign, 0.00644x50x12. 5 equals sign, 4.025 volts. The overvoltage control automatically protects the generator system when excessive voltage is present by opening the shunt field circuit. A series wound DC electric motor will normally require more current at low RPM than at high RPM. A certain switch is described as a single-pole, double-throw, SPDT switch. The throw of a switch indicates the number of circuits each pole can complete through the switch. In troubleshooting an electrical circuit, if an ohmmeter is properly connected across a circuit component and some value of resistance is read, the component has continuity and is not open. It has continuity. The poles of a generator are laminated to reduce eddy current losses. When necessary during operation, CSD disconnect is usually accomplished by a switch in the cockpit. What is a cause of generator brush arcing? Low spring tension. What is the advantage of a current limiter? It will take overload for a short period. Which of the following are some uses for a DC Selson system? Indicate the position of retractable landing gear, cowl flaps position, cooler door position, fuel quantity, and position of wing flaps. Certain transport aircraft use AC electrical power for all normal operation and battery, furnished DC electrical power for standby emergency use. In aircraft of this type that operate no DC generators, the batteries are kept charged by rectifiers, which use the aircraft's AC generators as a source of power. The purpose of a rectifier in an electrical system is to change alternating current to direct current. To test generator or motor armature windings for opens, place armature in a growler and connect a 110V test light on adjacent segments. Light should light. Which of the following is not one of the purposes of interpoles in a generator? Reduce field strength. In an AC circuit with no phase lead or lag, which is true. Real power equals apparent power. Circuits that must be operated only in an emergency or whose inadvertent activation could endanger a system frequently employ. Guarded switches. 1. A DC Selson system is a widely used electrical method of indicating a remote mechanical movement or position. 2. A synchro-type indicating system is an electrical system used for transmitting information from one point to another. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. What is the appropriate method for installing pre-insulated terminal lugs and splices to electric wires? Using a crimping tool to secure the terminal lug. What type of instrument is used for measuring very high values of resistance? Megometer. The commutator of a generator changes alternating current produced in the armature into direct current as it is taken from the armature. Acts as a mechanical rectifier. The pole pieces or shoes used in a DC generator are a part of the field assembly. In installations where the ammeter is in the generator or alternator lead, and the regulator system does not limit the maximum current that the generator or alternator can deliver, the ammeter can be redlined at what percent of the generator or alternator rating. 100. CSD generators are usually cooled by oil spray. Oil canning of the sides of aluminum or steel electrical junction boxes is considered to be a shorting hazard. The navigation lights of some aircraft consist of a single circuit controlled by a single switch which has an ON position and an OFF position, with no additional positions possible. This switch is referred to as a single pole, single throw, SPST, two-position switch. When handling a high-voltage capacitor in an electrical circuit, be sure it is fully discharged before removing it from the circuit. Where are the heating elements located on most aircraft with electrically heated windshields? Laminated in the glass. What system component aids in the prevention of carburetor icing? Alcohol injection nozzle. Two possible sources of heat for the operation of a wing thermal anti-icing system are compressor bleed air and aircraft electrical system. Which of the following are found in a laminated integral electrically heated windshield system? Autotransformer, heat control relay, heat control toggle switch, and indicating light. What mixture may be used as a dicing fluid to remove frost from an aircraft surface? Ethylene glycol and isopropyl alcohol. What is the source of pressure for inflating dicer boots on reciprocating engine aircraft? The vane-type pump. Which of the following indications occur during a normal operational check of a pneumatic deesser system? Fluctuating readings on the pressure gauge and relatively steady readings on the vacuum gauge. Prior to installation of a pneumatic surface-bonded type dicer boots, on the leading edge of the wing, you should remove all paint from the area to be covered by the dicer boot. What should be used to melt the ice in a turbine engine if the compressor is immobile because of ice? Hot air. What may be used to clean deesser boots? Soap and water arcing in an electrically heated windshield panel usually indicates a breakdown in the conductive coating. What maintains normal windshield temperature control in an electrically heated windshield system? Thermistors. What are three methods of anti-icing aircraft windshields? An electric heating element in the windshield, a heated air circulating system, and windshield wipers and anti-icing fluid. What controls the inflation sequence in a pneumatic deesser boot system? Distributor valve. What method is usually employed to control the temperature of an anti-icing system using surface combustion heaters? Thermocycling switches. Which of the following regulates the vacuum of the air pump to hold the desing boots deflated when the pneumatic desing system is off? Suction relief valve. What is the principal characteristic of a windshield pneumatic rain removal system? An air blast forms a barrier that prevents raindrops from striking the windshield surface. Why should a chemical rain repellent not be used on a dry windshield? It will restrict visibility. Which of the following connects vacuum to the dicer boots when the system is not in operation to hold the boots tightly against the leading edges in flight? Distributor valve. What is the purpose of the distributor valve in a dicing system utilizing dicer boots? To sequence the dicer boots inflations symmetrically. What is used as a temperature sensing element in an electrically heated windshield? Thermistor. What is the purpose of the oil separator in the pneumatic desing system? To protect the dicer boots from oil deterioration. Some aircraft are protected against airframe icing by heating the leading edges of the airfoils and intake ducts. When is this type of anti-ice system usually operated during flight? Whenever icing conditions are first encountered or expected to occur. What icing condition may occur when there is no visible moisture present? Carburetor ice. How do dicer boots help remove ice accumulations? By breaking up ice formations. Which of the following is the best means to use when removing wet snow from an aircraft? A brush or a squeegee? What is one check for proper operation of a PDOT static tube heater after replacement? Ammeter reading. Why are the tubes in dicer boots alternately inflated? Alternate inflation of dicer boot tubes keeps disturbance of the airflow to a minimum. Smoke detectors that use a measurement of light transmissibility in the air are called photoelectrical devices. In reference to aircraft fire extinguishing systems, 1. During removal or installation, the terminals of discharge cartridges should be grounded or shorted. 2. Before connecting cartridge terminals to the electrical system, the system should be checked with a voltmeter to see that no voltage exists at the terminal connections. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. Built-in aircraft fire extinguishing systems are ordinarily charged with halogenated hydrocarbons and nitrogen. Determine what pressure is acceptable for a fire extinguisher when the surrounding area temperature is 33 degrees Fahrenheit, rounded to the nearest whole number. 215 to 302 sig. A carbon dioxide, CO2, handheld fire extinguisher may be used on an electrical fire if the horn is non-metallic. When air samples contain carbon monoxide, portable carbon monoxide detectors containing yellow silica gel will turn which color? Green. Which of the following are fire precautions which must be observed when working on an oxygen system? Display no smoking placards, provide adequate firefighting equipment, keep all tools and oxygen servicing equipment free from oil or grease, and avoid checking aircraft radio or electrical systems. Light refraction smoke detectors are activated when the detector senses light reflected from smoke particles passing through a chamber. In some fire extinguishing systems, evidence that the system has been intentionally discharged is indicated by the absence of a yellow disc on the side of the fuselage. Smoke in the cargo and/or baggage compartment of an aircraft is commonly detected by which instrument? Photoelectric cell. Why does the Fenwal fire detection system use spot detectors wired parallel between two separate circuits? A short may exist in either circuit without causing a false fire warning. A squib, as used in a fire protection system, is a device for causing the fire extinguishing agent to be released. Smoke detection instruments are classified by their method of detection. A contaminated carbon monoxide portable test unit may be returned to service by removing the indicating element and installing a new indicating element. The types of fire extinguishing agents for aircraft interior fires are water, carbon dioxide, dry chemical, and halogenated hydrocarbons. When used in fire detection systems having a single indicator light, thermal switches are wired in, parallel with each other, and in series with the light. A fire extinguisher container can be checked to determine its charge by weighing the container and its contents. The proper fire extinguishing agent to use on an aircraft brake fire is dry powder chemical. If a fire extinguisher cartridge is removed from a discharge valve, it should be used only on the original discharge valve assembly. In what areas of aircraft would you find a carbon monoxide detector? Cabin and cockpit. What occurs when a visual smoke detector is activated? A lamp within the indicator illuminates automatically. What is the color code for fire extinguisher lines? Brown. Which fire detection system measures temperature rise compared to a reference temperature? Thermocouple. Maintenance of fire detection systems includes the replacement of damaged sensing elements. On a periodic check of fire extinguisher containers, the pressure was not between minimum and maximum limits. What procedure should be followed? Replace the extinguisher container. The most common cause of false fire warnings in continuous loop fire detection systems is dents, kinks, or crushed sensor sections. The thermal switches of a bimetallic thermal switch type fire detection single loop system are heat-sensitive units that complete circuits at a certain temperature. They are connected in parallel with each other, but in series with the indicator lights. A thermocouple in a fire detection system causes the warning system to operate because it generates a small current when heated. Using the chart, determine the temperature range for a fire extinguishing agent storage container with a pressure of 330 sig. Consider 330 sig for both minimum and maximum pressure. 45 to 73 degree F. What method is used to detect the thermal discharge of a built-in fire extinguisher system? A rupture of the red plastic disc in the thermal discharge line. Which fire extinguishing agent is considered to be the least toxic? Bromotrifluoromethane, halon 1301. The thermocouple fire warning system is activated by a rate of temperature rise. A helicopter in forward flight cruise configuration changes direction by tilting the main rotor disc in the desired direction by using the cyclic pitch control. The auxiliary tail rotor of a helicopter permits the pilot to compensate for and/or accomplish which of the following? Torque and directional control. Wing dihedral, a rigging consideration on most airplanes of conventional design, contributes most to stability of the airplane about its longitudinal axis. The purpose in checking main rotor blade tracking is to determine the relative position of the blades during rotation. Main rotor blades that do not cone by the same amount during rotation are said to be out of or track. In a hovering helicopter equipped with a tail rotor, directional control is maintained by varying the pitch of the tail rotor blades. Other than the manufacturer maintenance manual, what other document could be used to determine the primary flight control surface deflection for an imported aircraft that is reassembled after shipment? Aircraft type certificate data sheet. Movement about the longitudinal axis roll in a helicopter is affected by movement of the cyclic pitch control. Movement about the lateral axis, pitch, in a helicopter is affected by movement of the cyclic pitch control. One purpose of the freewheeling unit required between the engine and the helicopter transmission is to automatically disengage the rotor from the engine in case of an engine failure. A reduction in anti-torque thrust will cause the tail to pivot in the direction of torque rotation around the main rotor axis. What is the purpose of the freewheeling unit in a helicopter drive system? It disengages the engine from the main rotor when engine RPM is less than rotor RPM. If a single rotor helicopter is in forward horizontal flight, the angle of attack of the advancing blade is less than the retreating blade. Which statement is correct concerning torque effect on helicopters? Torque direction is the opposite of rotor blade rotation. In rotorcraft external loading, the ideal location of the cargo release is where the line of action passes through the center of gravity at all times. The vertical flight of a helicopter is controlled by collective pitch changes. What are the components used to heat water supply lines and wastewater tanks? Heater blankets and inline heaters. The wastewater tanks hold gray water.